The Arlington County Board is in session for today's work session on March 11th, 2021. We have a number of items to review as part of our budget work sessions, and this is the fourth for fiscal year 2022. Thank you to all of staff leadership staff who's joining us. Our topics for today are Department of Technology Services and Department of Economic Development. I'd like to remind everyone that the presentations being seen today are available online, as is the entire budget document. If you want to have time to hear from, we want to have time to hear from everyone. So we'd ask our commissions to keep their, and partnerships to keep their presentations to 3 minutes. And before we get started, I'll note that today is spring day, perhaps first warmish day that we've had. And our test positivity rate for COVID is down to 4.3%. We are also, we have just had passage and imminently signing of the American Rescue Plan, which will provide resources to Arlington, both to the county and to Arlington Public Schools, to help us meet some of the needs of the pandemic, as well as some of our critical budget needs. So the big picture, if we can just continue to stay disciplined for the coming months, maybe month, 2-3 months, more vaccines are coming. And so the recovery is coming. So first we'll hear today from the Department of Technology Services, followed by the representatives of the Information Technology Advisory Council and I believe the Fiscal Affairs Advisory Commission. But as we do, I'll turn it over to the manager for your introductions.
Thank you, Mr. DeFerranti and members of the board. As you said, we have a lot of items to cover today. I'm going to turn it over to Jack Belcher so he can introduce his staff and go ahead with his presentation. Jack?
Thank you, sir. Can you all see my presentation?
We sure can. Thank you, Mr.
All right, great. Thank you so much for the time today. I appreciate it. Let me start off with this, my slide presentation. DTS themes. They're the same themes as we had last year when we talked last March, before this all began. And they were equity, innovation, and resiliency. And in resiliency, we've had to defer not only from sustainability, but response. Be able to respond to the pandemic in many ways. And I cannot tell you how proud I am of my staff, the work they've put in, to work tirelessly, and they still do. We're very fortunate as a county to have these folks with us. So we'll go into and talk a little bit about what we've been doing. The other thing we have is a plan for delivery of our government services post-pandemic. And as we were talking earlier on this call, this has been trying for all of us. March the 17th will be the first day that I left the county workforce at Bosman and started working in a telework fashion. And it's been a long year. And I know my staff and I know you folks, you're frankly exhausted. This has been a long haul, but we've done a great job in terms of providing you with the technology we have. And lastly, what we're doing is we continue to keep our eye on the ball. What's happening around us in terms of technology. There are 5 major drivers that they see, whoever you talk to. One is connectivity. Second is cloud and what that means. Third is data, the extraordinary growth in data and what we do with that data. Cybersecurity, whatever data we get, it has to be secure. We've got to make sure we protect the privacy right and privacy of our residents, and we secure that data. And lastly, artificial intelligence. And, prior to this all beginning, it was a nice term, but it's a term now that's being adopted by many major industries. How can we use the power of technology to do things, repetitive tasks in a different fashion? And how can we be more, not only efficient, but effective in the delivery of services? Department overview, and we've tried to identify some of the major things we've done. They really have been significant. Everything from setting up a 799 call center, implementing contact tracing for public health, connecting the Connect Arlington fiber to the Virginia Hospital Center testing facility, taking 70% of our workforce, put them off site. We did it very rapidly. Fortunately, we made some investments that paid off. We adopted teams. In March of 2020, we averaged about 400 Teams meetings a month. Today, we average 18,000 a month, 18,000 team meeting. And it's what the result of this has been. We're working longer hours. We're more effective, I think, in terms of communication, but it's been a real shift in terms of how we operate and work. We've migrated the courts to virtual, and it probably never would have happened if it wasn't for the events that took place with the pandemic that required us to have people not necessarily in a courtroom. Certainly the virtual board meetings we've talked about. We've taken the Commonwealth Attorney's Office, put them into the future. They are now totally virtualized, and they're more effective than they've ever been in terms of being able to use technology and process information. Put a new ACE system in, which is our assessment and collection revenue system, at the same time that most of the development workforce was not on site. So many things taking place there. Innovation, thanks to you, we got approval for our innovation zone. We've expanded our cybersecurity. And there are a lot more. And the results been in September of 2020, we were recognized by the National Association of Counties as the #1 digital county for our size. And that was the 4th award, such award in the last 5 years, a real credit to the work we have here. So talking about that, equity is really important to us. And so I'm going to turn this over to Holly Hartel, our Deputy CIO for Strategic Initiatives. Holly, you want to take it?
Absolutely. Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you very much for the opportunity and the time to talk. I want to frame my conversation around the questions, the equity questions. As Jack mentioned, equity was important, and we continue to work this year across the county with DHS, CPHD, libraries, DPR, and many others to tackle the issue on digital equity. The question of who is burdened, you hear very often right now, not only locally, but also nationally about the impact of not having connectivity. You pick up the paper and you scan your email and you follow both national and Virginia politics, you hear the conversation. And more importantly, you hear things about funding. You also hear the conversation about not only the issue being a rural issue, but you're hearing more of a statement of it being an affordability issue. And let me be very clear, our issue is an affordability issue. Sharing with you now a map that we shared at a very similar map to what we shared at last year's budget presentation, showing where the areas of equity were in our county. And you see that the red areas are the ones that are not surprising, but are significantly impacted. I also want to highlight that the same groups that you hear about, and I'd shared this last year as well, that the older adult population, Hispanics and African American groups, and those who are making less income have less connectivity. We also know that there are a number of students who are impacted because they fall into these groups. What we also know is, who is missing and who is not able to take advantage of the county services. Through this past year, we were able to understand a little bit more about who is not connected, and working through multiple models. And I've said before, or someone said before, and I've stolen the statement, is like a rock and you're chipping away at it. But it's what I know is there are a number of people who are looking to participate in school and adult learning. We know there's a number of people who are looking to participate in telehealth, and knowing that telehealth is not only phone, but video would be preferred, but there are challenges. We know that there are older adult populations that the social connection is very important to them. We also know that there's small businesses along Columbia Pike and other areas in the county where having the digital literacy skills is really important for them, and understanding how to take advantage of funding, or how to keep a website up so they can keep their business moving forward. We also understand there are many other areas of county services that are important in supporting that connectivity. How do we know this? I said, you see the map with the data. We also have done our own surveying to understand a little bit more about the impacted community, understanding that there is an interest in more internet connectivity options and better price, understanding that a lot of people do have devices, but many of them are referring to their cell phone to provide the connection. We also working very closely with Raj and his team at schools. We know that we've made progress with the schools. The information from them is that 99% of the population at APS is participating in virtual learning. However, of that population, 95 to 96% are actually participating in an acceptable level. So it's a complicated question, but really understanding a little bit more, this information is able to help us start to target of where specifically the area of need is. So you can see in the map, it shows our Wi-Fi hotspots, and if not looking closely, but you can visually see that we are trying to target those areas that are in the most area of need. Jack, if you can go to the slide down. Yep. So I'm going to talk a little bit specifically about what we have done. So in the areas of community connectivity, once again, the partnership with schools and the funding from CARES, we were able to connect 1,000 students with Comcast Internet Essentials. In order to try to get closer to those areas of need that you saw in the map, we also stood up 4 pop-up hotspots along Columbia Pike. We have 19 county hotspots that are now up and operating that are at county facilities. At its high point, it was around 17 monthly people who were connecting. You saw a little bit of a dip as it got colder, but you're starting to see that number come back up again. In addition, we collaborated with schools to have 34 of the schools have outdoor hotspots and support the connectivity at the schools. I don't have data on that usage, but we do know that they have been very appreciative of the work that we have done. On the resiliency side, we worked with the free clinic and the hospital to connect the Virginia hospital to the free clinic. That work is still happening, but there are weekly meetings happening right now to execute on that connection. Also going back to working with schools, as some of you may know, as students come back into the building, a lot of it's still going to be hybrid, and there will be a larger need for internet service in the schools. And we worked with schools to upgrade their connection from a 1 gig to a 10 gig to support that virtual learning from within the school building. We also worked with schools to create a secondary link out to the cloud. So if there is an issue within the connection, and if you still have a snow day, you'll still be able to connect. On the innovation side, we have worked with ourselves as well as governor's funding to stand up a private LTE network to provide broadband services to those students and adult learners who might not have other means of having access. We also worked and executed a feasibility study to look at a model for extending broadband services to specific affordable housing property. We looked at both the Gates of Boston and Arlington View Terrace. So when we talk about who benefits from this, and we think about, let me be honest, digital equity is a long-term investment. And I can also tell you it's very easy to say who the connectivity is, but the harder question of how do you measure the success, there are a lot of factors that play into that. But I want to highlight where we're focusing right now is, on the affordable housing properties for the school-age children along the areas of Columbia Pike, once again, going back to the map, and then making sure that people are aware of it, can get to the hot spots, and then looking to expand and build beyond there. So the infrastructure is foundational in everything that we're doing, but we have found that there's like many other programs that the county offices and services offers, that the community that we're trying to reach is really hard, and that a thoughtful approach is needed, a multi-pronged approach is needed. And we need to be aware and cognizant of the language, the cultural, the differences, and the community priorities, and making sure that we're factoring that into the solution as well as the measuring of success. So I want to leave with the fact that, we have provided a scaffolding and our investments have been great. And now we're looking to hope to grow so that we have a community that can fully participate in society as what our goal is stated. And thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Thank you, Holly. Mr. Chair, I'd like to introduce Gilbert Pizano. He's just joined us as our Director of Budget. Gilbert, you want to take over?
Hello, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to be here. So as you all know, technology and services that we use to support the organization have changed rapidly. So as a part of the FY22 base budget, there were a number of structural adjustments that were made to the budget. For the DTS base budget, some of those changes included a realignment of personnel and non-personnel budgets. An example of this is some adjustments that were made to the charging out of costs for services provided by DTS. And then there are a number of adjustments that were made to align FTEs and contractual services. Some work which has been performed by contractors are now being done by county staff and vice versa. In addition, there were a variety of contractual cost increases, which include support for the county's financial system, maintenance costs for the treasurer's revenue collection system, and additional costs for software like the county's new electronic signature system. So with that was a budget realignment in FY22, $372,000. That was a conversion of overstrength positions, and that added 11 FTEs. Again, these were positions that were covering services within the county already. There was also an increase of contractual services for items such as the ERP, website management, and other software licensing costs. And that total cost is $896,000 with no impact to the staffing within the county. Some details of the budget reductions. There was a 1 FTE reduction that from Prism, that was a senior IT analyst, and also a reduction of contractual support for the county's financial and human resources system, also known as Prism. That total reduction is $416,000. Some impacts of that reduction is delays to Prism's financial and human resources applications, any updates related to that, enhancements and fixes, and also a reduced support for the ongoing day-to-day operations or to the users. There was also a reduction of 1 FTE that supported monitoring and security systems as part of the cybersecurity group. This reduction was $146,000, and the impact of that service level will be mitigated through the redistribution of cybersecurity duties to other existing staff. Additionally, there was the ERMS elimination of an electronic records management system contractor. This reduction supports the county staff using board report and agenda support system, also known as BRASS, as well as other ERMS applications. The impact is somewhat mitigated by reassigning existing staff to EMRS support, and that reduction is $100,000. And the network management services also had a reduction of $100,000. This was a contractor support, and this will also lead to longer response times to resolve network system outages and any security events. There was also a $90,000 reduction to the call center support. This will be a reduction in the network and telephone contractor that supports that operation by 20%. This one will lead to a longer and more frequent downtime for public-facing call centers when call center abnormalities or outages occur. And then there was also a $20,000 reduction to staff training. This will reduce the training budget for the department's staff, and it may limit the ability of staff to adopt and support newer technology.
Okay, I've got the key budget considerations. The first one is staffing. We've been very successful, and that's because I'm surrounded by smart people. They know how to get the job done. They just go do it. They come here for a reason. They want to achieve. They love public service, and they get a thrill out of doing things. Getting them to stop work is the biggest problem I have. You'll see in the next bullet, we talk about standing up a LTE network, a CBRS network. The governor gave us a shot clock deadline of getting it done by December the 25th. They got the charge third week of October, and they worked through Christmas Eve finishing to get that up. And they did that because it meant something to them. My concern is that the regional demand for technology talent like we have right here today is going to increase. President Biden has said that he's going to put in a technology modernization program for the federal government, and he has to. It needs to be revamped, and he's going to need good people. They've asked for 100,000 employees who understand cybersecurity. They want to hire a like number of employees, 100,000 for data scientists. There's going to be a continual push from private industry. We saw that coming with Amazon. I'm just concerned long term that we're going to have some challenges keeping the people we have if we don't really invest in them. The managers put in some effort, some good programs to help our staff on the short term. But given what we have now, you can work anywhere you want. And so we've been able to attract people from around the state who work from their home, work for us, and easily could move into another job if they so desired. So that's a big budget consideration for me, and I'm concerned about it. 5G technology.
Sorry, Mr. Belcher, I think could you share your screen, or do you intend to be sharing your screen? We can hear how much you care for employees, but if you wanted to share your screen, I'm not sure that we're seeing it up at the front. Maybe just me.
Are you not seeing the screen at all?
Now I think I got it.
Yeah, I can see it.
Thank you, colleagues, and thank you.
That's okay. Yep.
Jack, for
always hard to know.
Matt, this is the problem I have in the CIO do this job. I don't do a good job in technology, obviously. I'm sorry. Can you see it now?
Sure can. Thank you.
All right. So I think leveraging 5G technology, and it's a new thing that's coming in, is breathtaking. What we're talking about doing with, Carly mentioned, with virtual learning, we're seeing some really attractive solutions being put out that could really help us, not only in terms of virtual learning, but in terms of being able to do things we haven't been able to do in terms of the county, being able to react to new data that comes into it, and be able to be more proactive in the delivery of services. And lastly, I think budget considerations are, we'll get through this, but what's the new norm going to look like? And it's really trying to identify, once we get the vaccines, what are we having a fully returning workforce? If not, then how do we provide the services they need to be more efficient? Everything we read said more the continuing emphasis on mobility will be there. People will want to be able to access county services anytime, anywhere, in any form. And so how do we make sure that our infrastructure is positioned to be able to meet that need? So with that, I am done. Thank you, Mr. Manager. Thank you, Matt.
Appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Belcher, and thanks, colleagues, for straightening me out on seeing the presentation. Also want to say a thank you to Ms. Hartel and a welcome to Mr. Pizano. We will now go, we'll come to questions shortly, but first we'll go to our Information Technology Advisory Commission. And I believe Mary Cronell is here, and also perhaps Frank as well.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, Frank, both of us are here. So yes, Frank is vice chair, and you do have, board, I believe you have a letter from the Tech Commission, as we refer to it. So just a couple of highlights. One, we really believe you need to look at that digital element for the master plan. It really will help planning moving forward and help budgeting. So now's the time. And then the staff cuts in cyber are risky. We really think that ought to be revisited. And then Jack has a chief data officer, and obviously we echo Jack's praise. I mean, this year has been unprecedented for any tech team, and this one has performed really well. But the chief data officer doesn't have any staff, and you're going to have more data, and you need to put in infrastructure now, because it's just going to get worse. You're going to have a waterfall, and it's going to continue. So you really do need to look at that, and you need to staff it. The chief data officer has to deal with privacy and security of data, and they can't do it. One person can't do it. So, and then finally, Holly's comment about digital equity, let no crisis go to waste. I mean, we did some amazing things this year, but we really, as a community, need to think about what are the basics for digital rights, and what's the value system going further in terms of digital literacy for our county, and how do we sustain some of these things that Jack's team has put into place. And obviously the federal government with, yes, the passing and hopefully signing soon of the rescue plan will help. We'll get hopefully some support for that, but it really will be important for us to ask those questions and say, if you're a resident of Arlington, what access do you have in terms of digitally? What's the digital future of Arlington? And we think that digital element will help ask those important questions, and then make sure that the budget is aligned with that. We are Frank and I are open for questions. We just wanted to highlight those items, and certainly you can look at the letter from our commission if you want to know any more about those 4 items.
Thank you, Chair Cornell.
I was going to say, just real quickly, maybe I can just touch on the federal help that is on the way. The CARES Act, which was adopted at the end of 2020, included $3.2 billion for an emergency broadband connectivity benefit, which includes $50 a month discounts to low-income households provided. And the FCC, at the end of February, adopted rules to implement. Also includes $100 one-time help towards purchase of devices for those low-income households. Also included $250 million for the FCC's telehealth program. The American Rescue Plan, which was signed today, by the way, the president was able to, they accelerated it and were able to sign it today. It includes $7.6 billion for the E-rate emergency connectivity fund, and it gives the FCC 60 days to set in place rules to enable eligible schools and libraries to pay 100% of cost of equipment and/or advanced communication services for remote learning and in school, and that money will be available through 2030. So it should be some significant funding. There's also $17 billion for the federal refreshment of the digital infrastructure, as Jack mentioned. I think that while it has a risk of luring away employees, but I think it has on the plus side, I think a lot of our companies here in Arlington stand to benefit from that new work, I think. So I think it could help fill some office space.
Great, thank you. Appreciate the summary and the update. I thought I saw a note that the American Rescue Plan had been signed, but I wasn't sure. So we will open the floor and appreciate both Frank and Mary, both of you being willing to stay should we have specific questions for you. I know that there will be questions. This is an area where I think a lot of us have interest. So colleagues, if you have questions, I'm also happy to start with one. And that is, I guess this is a framing question that might be for the manager. And it certainly also might be for Mr. Belcher as well. It's with the passage of the American Rescue Plan, this area will have some investments that can be one-time funding. And I'm wondering if you have thought yet about one-time investments in the area of technology. I also could envision, we're smack in the middle of budget process, that you might need a minute to sort of look at the bill and then see what comes next. Do you have thoughts about one-time funding generally in the budget and then maybe one-time funding in the area of technology?
So I will start out with the more broad question, and then Jack can answer more specifics. We are studying the 600 plus page text of the bill, and I will be back to you. I don't know exactly when, but certainly before the month is out or in the next week or two, with some suggestions on how to take advantage of the funding that the county's going to be able to get. Right now, as far as direct aid, there's $46 million split into 2 tranches, $23 million this year and $23 million coming to us in 2022. Each bucket has a 4-year timeline on when the money can be available for. So I will have some suggestions on that. There also are, as has been mentioned by Frank and Mary and Jack, separate buckets on other funding. We'll have to see whether we're eligible for that. But I'll let Jack answer any questions about, if there were one-time funds available, how they might be spent for technology.
Yeah, and again, this is Jack talking, and it's really not, we still got to work through what the post-norm is going to look like. But it's going to be more mobile. I don't see us returning back at the rates we had prior to March the 17th and March the 16th. You're going to see more people working off-site. They're more productive. They're able to get the job done. They're happier. So they're reducing on tolls, gas, go down the list. So how do we accommodate that? And I mentioned that about anytime, anywhere access to services. If you look at our workforce today, and we say we have 1,900 people who are offline, white collar workers that are doing work offline. Each one of them has a desk phone, piece of plastic on their desk. Do we need that? I don't think so. I think we become so reliant upon cell phones that we can get rid of those. To make that happen, we have to figure out how we can make that work better. We have call centers that have grown up organically over the years, and they do everything from trash pickup to the 799 number to others. They're archaic. They have limits to them. They can only go so far. Creating and implementing a cloud-based call contact center that allows for omni connections. By that, I mean you can call, you can text, you can enter into a chat, you can do it in multi-languages, you can scale it as necessary to meet the need. It's something we need to invest in as a county. And we got to look at our whole infrastructure. Going forward here, the CIP is coming up. And if we go the way we did before, I'm going to invest a lot of money in putting on gear that empowers the network desktop, the desktop you have in the county today. Do I need to do that? Or maybe what I should do is think about that workforce is going to be reduced significantly on site. And maybe what I need to do is invest in more wireless, higher speed wireless that makes that work. So those are a couple things right there. And then there are a number of things that we'll have to delay because we just don't have the budget. But the things that, in order to keep refreshing our technology gets old. And if you don't refresh it, it breaks. And so you have to spend and invest in that. And that's an effort as well. And then lastly, there are what I call moonshots. There are things we ought to think about that are going to have an amazing impact on a county. I talked about artificial intelligence. There's a new whole idea called robotic process automation. That's not taking robots and putting them online, but what it's doing is taking what we do in a repetitive fashion, day in and day out, and automating it, and having the machine do it. So rather, you see Amazon's doing it in warehouses. You see every major supplier is looking at these tasks and saying, how can we take those skills that we're using and applying there and applying in a different fashion? So I think this is going to come. I think the whole wireless side is going to explode. And we have so much value that we could realize from that, whether it be performance parking. How are we going to do performance parking? Well, if we do the way we do it now, we basically will hire a Verizon or Comcast to give us communication to a sensor. Well, that costs money. Through something like we're talking about with 5G, you obviate that cost and you make it more efficient and more pervasive. And so you can have thousands of sensors that are doing everything from managing where parking spaces are to identifying the quality of air, to being able to be more proactive in the delivery of emergency services. So I feel like I'm lecturing, but I think there's so many things we could do if we had an intentional approach to how we could use those funds. And that's going to depend on what we get, and what's allowable.
Thank you. No, you can hear your enthusiasm for what's to come, and so we will we'll go to questions. Mr. Dorsey, I believe, first.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for the presentation, and thank you, Mary and Frank, for the Tech Commission's guidance. My substantive question is going to really start where you all left off, but before that, I would be remiss if I didn't say, Mr. Belcher, given my interaction with regional local government officials as they've all used these virtual platforms over the last year, I've heard none of them express that they've had a seamless experience from a cybersecurity issue. Like, they've all experienced some hiccups, and I don't recall that we've had any while we've been using these virtual platforms to meet and do work. So clearly, whatever you're doing is working. And with that in mind, that really raises the idea of not investing in the vacant cybersecurity engineer position as being something that leads me to believe that maybe that's not the wisest thing in the world to do. So can you just walk me through your thinking, other than this was an already existing vacant position? I'm looking for assurance that this is not going to put us in a problematic place in the future.
I can't guarantee that. I'll be honest with you. It could happen anytime, anywhere. The position we had, the person retired, and just recently, and so it's been left open until such time as we can figure how best to solve it. We're very fortunate because we started a program a few years ago where we attracted management interns, kids that are just getting out of college and may not have had experience in what we were talking about, and we trained them. And so we've got 2 very highly qualified management interns who make a modicum of income, but are available to assume these responsibilities. And they're fresh, they've got energy. So I'm confident that they will pick up the load there. Saying that, we have to continually be on guard. What we were very fortunate is last year, the manager put in some money, some funds he had available to acquire services of an internet-based company that would provide that continual monitoring of our environment. And see, we normally, local jurisdictions do, we don't have the money. So what we do is we have people who are looking at screens, trying to make determination of what may be a problem. What we did is when we transitioned to this, we, instead of thinking in human time, we're thinking in internet time. And so what these facilities are doing, they're identifying attacks before we see them. If I had my security staff on, they would talk about the thousands and thousands of phishing attempts that we see every day. They continue to come. Just yesterday, I had to change my password, and I did. And then within 5 minutes after that, I got an email from Joe at the help desk. And Joe said, "Hey, do you want to keep your password? You don't have to go through this." Now, think about that sophistication all of a sudden. They knew I had changed my password, and they sent me an email saying, "Hey, Joe from the help desk." Thankfully, I looked at it and said, "I don't know, Joe, first of all, the help desk, that's not a county ID." But this is happening all the time, and they're getting more and more sophisticated. It used to be that we were worried about the hackers who were doing it for ransomware and that effect. It's really now become it's more pervasive, and so we have to understand that that's out there. About a year ago, I sat on a panel with a colleague of mine from Baltimore County, Frank Johnson, and we did it was a fireside chat with Amazon. Frank and I were talking about the same issues, same problems. Frank went home, I went home. 3 months later, Frank got cracked in Baltimore. Baltimore spent over $55 million in trying to just recover. By the way of God, it did not affect me. It easily could have. How they got in, if you talk to Frank, he got in how you would always expect to get in. Not educating your staff to understand what the dangers are. Somebody coming up, a colleague coming up to you and saying, "I really got to get this system up because we need it, because the citizens want it." And he gave into that. And when he gave into that, he got cracked. And today's date, he lives in Silver Spring. He'll tell you some of the mistakes he made then were mistakes I could have made easily. So it's having that continual vigilance and being able to have my security people say no when that's difficult to say. Because when you come from IT, you always want to say yes. Yes, you can do it. Yes, we can make this work. But we have to say no, and we have to insist that we all have training. So.
Okay. And so with that was going to be my second question. Are we sufficiently resourced from a training capacity to ensure as we grow, for example, the body-worn camera program and have perhaps new classes of employees who are interacting with cloud-based services, that we are sufficiently able to spread out the training and awareness raising that's necessary so that they can participate in those activities with as little risk as possible?
Every day, every month that we have training that staff have to take, they're required to take.
I know, we take it.
Yeah, good. we look at the rates, so we can tell they're doing a good job. But there's that. But it happens. It's, again, the situation I explained in Baltimore could have easily happened here. Easily. We want to get the system up. We're not getting the information out we need to the constituents. Let's put it up. Look the other way. And it's that saying no. It's that continual vigilance. Are we doing enough? I can't say that. I don't know. Honestly.
But just to close this loop, since you've cited it twice, and then I'll yield, Mr. Chair, if Baltimore had happened to us, though, we had a level of redundancy with our data that wouldn't have left us at risk that we would have had to have paid that ransom, correct?
No, it's not the case. We probably would have had to pay that ransom.
Okay.
We would have been impacted as they were. What happened was I'd love to bring Frank in here just to have a discussion with you sometime about how it happened. But his traditional partners, Microsoft, Amazon, all had said, anytime you have a problem, we're there when you need it. You know when it happened? They wouldn't answer the phone. So it can happen, and so it's one of those things you have to be aware. It depends how pervasive the attack is, and how early they get in. We had an attempt not too long ago with solar winds, which is a monitoring tool we have. We caught it. Our security people pulled it back out, scrubbed it before they put it back in. Easily, that could have been a pathway in. And the challenge there is the federal government didn't find out about it for months after it occurred. And once that happens, they have the ability to come in and lay seeds. And so the idea is not to realize chaos that day, but to wait until the time is ripe to do it. And that's something we got to be aware of. So could that happen here? Yes. And it's not because we're not doing everything we can. It's just that it's becoming a very sophisticated world now.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Belcher and Mr. Dorsey, for the questions. The investment last year in the automated system to help us with cybersecurity just seems all the wiser every moment that we've been through this. So we'll go to one other question. I'm not quite sure who was first in this process today. If you think you were, why don't we start with Mr. Karantonis, and then Mary and Frank, after that set of questions, if you have comments, we'll collect this next question, and then we'll go to you if you have comments on this one as well. Mr. Karantonis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Belcher and the entire team. Ms. Cartel is here as well. This has been an eye-opening year for all of us. You have been one of the departments that really carried the weight of responding to this pandemic in all possible ways, responding also to what our residents wanted, what we had to do for equity, for emergency equity response. And I'm just trying to find in the budget the way we are long-term responding to the persistent issues with a digital divide, about which we have been discussing for years, but this was the year where I believe what we broke through, and we have now a very sturdy, also technical and economic conversation about how to deal with that in the future. Before I go to my actual question, I wanted to say that following Mr. Dorsey's question about the cybersecurity, is not only cybersecurity as a cyber defense of our county. I'm also really concerned about the concepts of cybersecurity for the entire user environment in Arlington County. And basically what we are on, and what you said, and I agree with that, is that we are expanding our digital infrastructure to all facets of Arlington's life, to the whole government and the whole delivery. So I do think that we have to think very, very carefully about our investment in cybersecurity as we go forward. This is also why I personally find it enticing, intellectually enticing to begin with, the proposition of our commission to include that in our general planning. So in our comp plan, our comprehensive plan, to have a digital element of the comprehensive plan. This is something that grows on me the more I think about that. You talked also about the implementation of artificial intelligence and how we collect data, how we have automated systems that will be collecting data, systems that will learn in the process, learn in quotation marks in the process, and how we will be processing that. All this guides me to a position where it's difficult for me to reconcile that with reducing our investment in that. A specific question, though. So the one FTE that is proposed to reduce for the maintenance of PRISM. Just a few months ago, we were discussing on how urgent it is to actually invest in PRISM and upgrade the system for a ton of reasons. So how do we reconcile the two things?
It means, as we said in the budget, it's an impact. There's no doubt about it. It slows down what we were doing. We had plans before the pandemic to invest in a complete refreshment of the PRISM system, which is based on Oracle. It's the Oracle business system. And it was going to have some amazing results in terms of the county, what we do. We've had to back off of that. We're not progressing on that at the time scale we are. What we're looking at is an intermediate upgrade of what we have. It's going to take longer to do it. There's less support for my colleagues in DMF to get the reports they need in the fashion they need and the time they want. It's a difficult choice to make. It's when you're faced with cutting, you have to find ways you can cut. It's painful. My director, who's in charge of enterprise applications, not only took that cut, she took a cut in terms of our electronic document management system, which is critical. That's how all those reports come to you. They have to go, you asked that they be to you at a certain time. The system's 16 years old. The only way you can get it, you got to be on site to access it. You can't really access it off site. It's got all kinds of problems with it. And so what's going to happen in that is, and I think Gilbert talked a little bit about the impact, there are going to be times when things aren't coming in. You're not getting the information you need in the time fashion you want. Not because the staff aren't wanting to do it, it's because the system itself has aged to that point where we have to rethink it. The PRISM initiative would have had as a component a replacement for that document management system. And that would have been accessible outside of the county. You could have accessed it from your home or whatever. My colleagues who deal in this, in CPHD and DES, the county manager's office, frequently you have to get in the car and drive into work to be able to make upgrades. That's not how we should be operating in the future. And so we've got to really think that through. So yes, it's painful. It's not without impact. But when we look at our work, to go back a second, when you look at the work I was doing, my department was doing prior to March 17, we were fully occupied. I didn't have people sitting around saying, hey, what are we doing today? Yep. Since that time, my technology department has picked up at least 6 to 7 new lines of business. Well, how do you stretch your staff to do those? Whether it be the courts, who are now doing the video conferencing, whether it's this meeting here, whether it be this public health, you can't stretch them. It's not because they don't want to do the work. It's just we just don't have the capacity. So I had to make cuts. Those are not the easiest cuts, but they were the cuts that you could look at and say, we're just going to have to suck it up and live with it for the next few months.
Thank you, Mr. Belcher and Mr. Karantonis for the question. I just do want to give a quick opportunity, Mary, since you identified that, I don't know if you had thoughts on the comprehensive plan element of what Mr. Karantonis mentioned. It seemed as though both you and Mr. Karantonis was echoing your letter, and you may not have additional thoughts, but certainly if you do, let us know. And at this stage, we'll go to Ms. Crystal first. Sorry to do a slight audible there, and then because Ms. Garvey has mentioned that it was Ms. Crystal first and then her. So go ahead, Ms. Crystal.
Well, I actually have an incredibly specific question about to make sure, sort of a check for understanding question about the budget changes. If you wanted to continue the comp plan element discussion, by all means do that. I don't mean to get us way into the weeds when we're having a loftier discussion.
Well, I don't know, Mr. Belcher, if you have any thoughts about how we might, that's a significant amount of work, and we're just recovering from, you said you had 6 to 7 new lines of business. So that is a discussion that we would want to think about. And I don't know if you have specific thoughts on the comprehensive plan proposal or recommendation, Jack.
That was Mark had brought that. Mary brought that to Mark, I think the county manager, and with Ken Bell, and that was to develop another element to the comprehensive plan, and it made a lot of sense. I don't know, Mark or Mary, I'd probably defer to you both on terms of why that's so important.
Go ahead, Mary.
Exactly. I mean, I think institutionally, without digital being part of your plan, you're not going to be able to align the priorities. I mean, all of us will be gone, but institutionally, if you say, look, for our future, for Arlington County's future, digital is the core. I mean, you found that out this year, right? Without digital, you wouldn't be able to continue your business. And so having it on the side and having, I mean, this does tie into the cyber question as well, because if somebody puts something on in another part of the county without Jack's knowledge, and he still has to, it compromises us, right? So it's not just to have it as a strategic element and have it as a strategic tool, it's also a safety tool, right? Because when you have an IT governance for the county, you begin to align the purchases with your strategic plan. And if you all aren't looking at that from an overarching point of view, you may make decisions without the full picture, right? Because more and more, this is going to be a tech ecosystem. With Amazon coming, you all are going to see an incredible surge of every tech bubble in the world. And Arlington County has to step back, say what's important for the community, how do we want to move forward in our digital future, what's the baseline for every citizen, no matter what their socioeconomic status, what's their access to digital, and then also how do we define our digital future? What privacy do we want to protect? What innovation do we have over here? What's the balance? All those questions come up when you incorporate it into your master plan. And that's why I think it's important for you to have visibility.
Thank you. Really appreciate that. And I see, Mark, Mr. Schwartz, did you want to add on this or?
Well, there are two things. One is that the group that Jack was referring to has prepared something for me to review. I have a fairly lengthy document prepared. Evan Burfield stepped in and took up the reins of the group. Haven't had an opportunity to study it very closely because I've been preoccupied, but I look forward to looking at that. And just picking up on one thing that Mary said, I am not a big believer in spending 2 years trying to add an element to our comp plan on all things digital. I think that though she did identify some very specific things, a privacy policy and a policy on what's a basic rights when it comes to digital access, that I think we do need to work through. Those are serious policy issues. And the thing about some of the other issues she mentioned are related to management. So I think there is a role for additional policy elements to be adopted. I'm not sure I want to go through I'm not sure I want to hang out with the Planning Commission looking at adding another element to the comp plan, but more to come. There's a lot of work that's already been done, and I'll get back to you with a summary of that when things get just a little bit less hectic.
Well, I think we should say unanimously, we would say thank you for prioritizing vaccine distribution at the moment, and understandable, of course. We actually prefer that you give that the report a little more time. Cybersecurity and the specific issues that you identified are important, and really appreciate, Mary, your additional perspective. So I think with that, we're probably ready to go to Ms. Crystal. Great, and then Ms. Carby.
Yeah, thank you so much. This is a really interesting conversation, and I think our county auditor once said something pretty wise to me, that there is often a desire for, and I know this will resonate with Ms. Garvey, for a strategic plan for Arlington County, which is very hard to do for a lot of reasons, chiefly because there are many actors involved, which is what the comp plan seeks to reconcile, more or less. But that's no reason there shouldn't be a strategic plan for Arlington County government as an organization, right? As a mid-sized to large organization. And so, Mary, as I'm listening to you talk, I'm thinking there's a lot here. Whether or not it's a comp plan element, I do wonder how we can think or encourage the manager to think, because so much of this is about the administration of county government, how to integrate some of these considerations and indeed imperatives into purchasing across departments, into daily practice across departments. and so forth. So I will admit that I share a little of the manager's hesitance about introducing a new comprehensive plan element planning exercise. I think, certainly there are some of those 10 elements, specifically the ones like dictated by Virginia statute that we will have, that don't do this. But by and large, the ones that we have sort of added recently, or the ones that are most effective, I find, as guiding policy documents, are the ones where we have issues that span the role of government, the role of private sector, the role of private property owners, the role of individuals, nonprofits, and others. And we actually do need to convene that whole community to try to come up with some guiding lights, whether that's the Affordable Housing Master Plan, or certainly the Community Energy Plan, and so forth. I'm not saying that's not the case for the information technology infrastructure. Certainly there are interests of private actors, of course, but it does seem to me that a lot of the imperative to start is within the organization and define applications across departments and across sectors before we then go out to a community. My question is incredibly technical, and forgive me, it's so basic that I wonder if I've just missed something, especially in Gilbert's presentation. But on slide 7 of the presentation, it talks about budget realignment and conversion of overstrength positions, which is going to have the impact of 11 additional FTEs. I've sort of sifted through the budget pages trying to understand what that means, can find very little. But indeed, when I get to the 10-year history trends, we are seeing a growth in FTEs. So, we're losing these folks that we've talked about at great length so far today, and yet we are gaining some. Mr. Belcher, can you just help me understand that? Very kind of basic, what I'm misunderstanding about the plus 11 FTEs in that budget presentation.
Certainly. Gilbert, do you want to, before I start, do you want to add anything?
No, just those were existing overstrength positions that are now being funded through the realignment of the budget. So as was kind of mentioned, there were some contractual budget items that were shifted to cover that. So a lot of it also was shifting in the work that's being done by DTS as well.
So what we?
I'm sorry. Could I ask? I'm just going to pull the dumb question. Can you tell me what that means? The conversion of overstrength employees. Could you put that in maybe a little more plain English for me?
Maybe by defining the terms first. What's an overstrength?
That would be a great way to do it.
What's a conversion? I think you tried to give an explanation about, services that the department was actually delivering, but they were not in its own account, and now it's going into that. But that's just my speculation. So please define what exactly this means.
And thank you, Mr. Pizano.
Yes. So the overstrength positions are could be contractors. There were some interns as well, but those are positions that were brought on. They were not necessarily budgeted FTEs, so they were not part of the FTE count previously. However, they were being used to support and augment the operations of the organization.
Okay. But just as, I think Mr. Belcher very compellingly explained why it's problematic to terminate an FTE position, even an unfilled one, and replace it with interns, I imagine conversely there may be gains of taking, a contract or intern position and turning it into an FTE, no?
So if I could step in just real quickly
Sure.
on this. As you know, technology has changed rapidly over the last few years, and we've talked to the board where we've converted contractors to FTEs and vice versa to be nimble in meeting the demands in the organization. So what's happened over the last couple of years is technology services had a number of work that was done by contractors. The budget was in the contract line, right? Mm-hmm. But we brought people on. Well, you hadn't authorized full positions in the budget. So what an overstrength is it's a temporary allowance of a position in a department. And so through the budget process and the realignment, we took a number, contractor dollars out, and we funded the positions. And so there was a lot of puts and takes in this budget to sort of realign resources. Mm-hmm. Another thing that's happened over the last couple of years is DTS as an organization has reorganized. especially with this enhancements in cybersecurity. And so, just as part of the 22 budget, there was, a number of pieces changing sort of below the surface, and we were just sort of putting, the different pieces in place. We had, Jack had mentioned the intern program, through some of the realignments, we were able to fund those intern positions. So they're still, now they're funded FTEs in the base budget, doing all the base operational things that DTS does. Is that a little?
It is really helpful. That's really helpful. I mean, I guess to the extent I maybe have a little skepticism here, it seems like there maybe is a difference between having a contractor and having an FTE. And so when we talk about, we've sort of labored over this question about the 3 positions that are unfilled right now that are being terminated in the budget, right? And that loss. I suppose I'm just sort of trying to get a sense of, from a management perspective, is that not offset in any gains by having 11 people, whose responsibilities are maybe supplemented by contractors or others, but who weren't employees of the department before, who will be in this budget? Or truly no, we see no difference between contractors and an FTE. It's only a sort of technical classification.
Well, technology service is a little more unique than management and finance.
Yeah.
Things, we've been doing the budget the same way for a long time, or but and it's FTEs that are in place, but Mr. Belcher needs resources that change rapidly, and so over time things just got a little out of line, and we tried to take this budget when a lot of things were changing to put the pieces in the places that they needed to be, both from their operational standpoint and from a budgetary standpoint. So I know it's a little confusing when you're looking at a budget that doesn't really sort of drill deep into the weeds and what's happening, but that's essentially what we're doing in the proposed budget this year.
If I could add something too, I think the majority of these, I think it's 10 of them, the 11 positions, are actually management interns. In other words, we brought kids in. We found that people didn't know how to get into the government.
Yeah.
And because it said government would ask for so many years of experience and the technology didn't exist. And so they didn't go there. Right. So what we decided, we took the approach of bringing in cohorts, 5 a year, to help us, with the idea that they would be here for a year, and if they did a good job, second year, and they would learn, they'd grow, we'd green the workforce, and then they'd leave. What they did is they came in, and exceptional credit to the program, they're top flyers. They're fresh. They took all our ownership, responsibility, and so then we found ourselves in a situation where we had these management interns who were performing functions that we had nobody else performing.
Yeah.
And we wanted to keep them. And so what Richard did in DMF is they said, how are you going to pay for them? And frankly, we didn't have the resources to pay for them. And so you're faced with telling them to leave and to me, that's the future. It's what we're bringing in here. They're coming into government service because they want to work in the government. So what Richard tried to do, and Budget and Mark and others, is try to realign my budget to recognize the growth in work we're doing, and also to preserve this class of workers we want. Not that the people we have are not good, but you want to create a diverse workforce that has new ideas, the energy, and it tells their friends, why don't you come work here?
Yeah.
And
so this conversion will allow you to keep that cohort of management interns on staff as employees.
I don't want to say, I believe so, Richard. Do you agree?
Or at least offer to them if they could.
Sure. Yes, they are now. Yes, that is the purpose.
Okay. This is incredibly helpful. Thank you. This is what I'm sort of trying to drive at is, what is the operational impact of this conversion? So I get it much better now, and thank you. And
it's difficult.
Oh my gosh, Jack, I hope that your interns are watching, because to hear the director of their department speak so compellingly about the value that they offer to this whole community, it's moving. So I hope they have a chance to hear you speak about them this way.
Katie, there's your future CIO, is one of those 10. So look at them, talk to them. They're good people, solid people.
Yes, thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Crystal and Mr. Stevenson, for helping, as well as Mr. Pizano on, after recently coming on board. Thank you for helping us clear that up. and get a more of a sense. We can also follow up with questions. I'm sure that the manager may have additional thoughts on it. So for now, let's go to Ms. Garvey.
Thank you. Yeah, this has been really helpful because I think we all sort of had the same questions. It's looking at, wait a minute, what's this coming and going? And I think what might be useful at some point, I like the comp plan. I don't want to spend 2 years doing it either. But I think actually the organization as a whole, and Ms. Crystal, I liked your suggestion of a strategic plan for the county organization, because I think we're going to need to do that moving out of COVID and everything we're doing virtually. How are we going to be doing our work in a year? And it isn't just DTS employees, it's lots of employees who are working from other places, maybe even in the country. Do we keep them as employees, even though they're somewhere else? Maybe in many cases, we're going to want to do that. And that's going to involve, I think, some planning and they're just going to need to be new policies and ways of deciding things. And one of the things at some point, not now, but I assume you'll be developing, Mr. Belcher, and I'd be interested to see a plan for your department on how to use contractors, employees, and interns, because you've got 3 classes of people. Some of them get paid a whole bunch of money. Some of them do really good work, and I think sometimes the two are not the same. So and certainly in the this particular field, things are just constantly changing, so you've got to be adapting constantly. So I would be interested at some point in sort of seeing a plan, not now, and you may not have one, but just you're thinking about how the department's going to move forward. What are the decision criteria for whether somebody's a contractor, an intern, or a full-time employee, and how are you going to plan to move forward for changes like that? And I don't think I have any particular questions for, they're either like really super in depth that we don't want to talk to. It's like a work session worthwhile, and maybe Mr. Chair, we could sort of think about that once we get through to a good point, and possibly that report that the manager's looking at and the committee helped put together is sort of an overall plan of how we're going to handle technology and how we're going to handle as an organization moving forward into, finally, we're definitely in the 21st century now, for sure. So how are we going to do things? But that's a much more in-depth thing. And then just one note that I'd be interested in exploring at some point is the whole issue of cybersecurity. And I keep wondering, and I think it's probably because of my age, sometimes all of this remote actually is such a security hazard, because everything that's remote, it's like the SCADA systems for our water and our electricity. If somebody can do that from their home in Arlington, that means somebody in Moscow or Beijing can do it too. And there may be some things that maybe it's much better security that actually, somebody just needs to go in and do and be there possibly. Anyway, I just tossed that out because sometimes real security might be not 21st century, but actually more 19th because it's too hard to break into. Anyway, that's just a thought I often have on security. I've kind of talked a lot. Big thanks to your department, Mr. Belcher, for getting us where we are now. It's been an amazing trip. I think there are a lot of changes here and a lot of interesting ideas to be explored, and probably we can't really do it in the context of this particular budget work session. But I'm glad that you're straightening out the interns, the contractors, and the full-time employees. That'll be good to help get straightened out, and we'll figure some of that out and be more structured about it going forward. Thank you.
And I'd add a 4th category too. It's the gig employment, the gig employee. And it's that person that comes in, does a service for you, and then leaves.
Yeah.
So do we necessarily have to hire somebody or contract with somebody, or could we have a procurement vehicle that brings in the best fit to do something for us, and then leaves? And that's the growing economy. People want to work in that environment from home, anywhere they want in the world. We did that a few years ago with I forget, it was some graphic work we wanted done, and we went on the site, and we got somebody from Singapore that actually signed up, did the graphics for us, did the whole storyboard. We paid them a fee. I think it was like $5,000. They were happy. We were happy. We got to work. In a traditional sense, we would have had to go out and hire a contractor, because I don't have people who can have the graphic skills. And do we need it? Writing is another one. Editing. There are plenty of good people out there who can write and edit. The not so good thing about technologists, we're good technologists, but in many cases we're not good writers. And if you're not good writers, you can't communicate. And if you can't communicate, then how can you get people to understand what it is you're trying to achieve? So I think you're right about that. It's really, and it's not just me saying this. It's what the industry is doing. The industry is moving to more of that concept of bringing in people as needed to fill functions that are needed.
Yeah, no, thank you. I'll look forward to that. All right, that's 4 categories, and I'm assuming that the industry is developing standards and criteria for how you decide what job gets done by whom. So
Yeah.
it's great. Fascinating. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Garvey, and thanks to you, Mr. Belcher. There's also there's so many who are helping to make even this meeting possible, and all that we're doing. And just usually we're here together, so we do have economic development to cover in addition this afternoon, running a few minutes behind, and want to be mindful there. So we have just a thank you to you, Mr. Belcher, Mr. Bayless, Richard Archambault, and then several others who are helping, Ms. Hartel and Mr. Pizano. Also, Mary and Frank, thank you for joining us. There's a ton of other issues that you started to raise, Ms. Garvey, that are policy related that may come after the budget. And, certainly funding for broadband is a huge equity issue that we have, in addition to New Urbana, those census tracts that Holly, you had a couple of them. I know our other housing providers have interests. This Prince William County is now allowing testimony in a different way online. There's also big issues there. I'll be curious whether the manager has thoughts within the manageable budget now that we are looking at, whether any of the PRISM or electronic document management system issues are worthy of one-time funding. But that's probably for a later day. We had great conversation today. Just another thank you to Mary and also to Frank. So we will move on.
And
Jack.
we will, just one thing before we go, we'll send to you, actually the state of Virginia has charged each municipality in having a digital plan, right? So you have a statute that is directing that. So with that kind of air cover, I think you can go forward whether what
Yep.
the framework is, but you've been directed. so now it's how we do it, right? But thank you. We really appreciate the opportunity.
Sure. Also, the governor just signed a statewide data privacy law, which is also going to entail some work, I'm sure, for the county as well.
Okay.
Matt,
Thank you
Chairman,
both.
Mr. Chairman, if I could say one more.
Go ahead, Mr. Belcher.
Yeah, if I could say one more thing. I mentioned today it's really easy to be when we're surrounded by smart people. And I have to say the board's been that way with me since I've been here. You guys are some of the best. You can't achieve if you don't have support, and you guys have been there. So thank you so much for everything you do.
Wow, that is, we should end on that note and also convey it to all of the employees that you lead, who I know that you care so deeply about their development and their work. So thank you, Mr. Belcher.
Thank you.
So we will now go on to economic development. And I believe Mr. Manager, I think Mr. Tucker may start, but you'll lead us forward.
I wanted to introduce Telly, and Telly, you're going to have to tell me, but I think, Telly, did you manage to get away without having a work session last year? Because you were hired right around the time the first virus showed up, and then I think we canceled a series of work sessions. But I'm so excited, everybody. Telly Tucker is a superstar. We're so lucky to have him, and he is going to wow you now. Over to you, Telly.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Manager. And it was purely coincidental that I showed up at the same time that the pandemic started. Let me just say that. I want to thank the members of the board, Mr. Chair, and members of the board for the opportunity to speak to the FY22 proposed budget for Arlington Economic Development. And I couldn't begin without first recognizing all the members of the Arlington Economic Development team. I'd like to take a moment to publicly thank them for their hard work, especially the diligent effort that they continue to provide during this challenging period. Many of them have completed stretch assignments or stepped up and volunteered in other capacities throughout the county during this last year. And I want them to know that as their director, I sincerely appreciate it. and I consider them the most valuable asset that I have. So with that, I will begin our presentation. In Arlington Economic Development, our mission statement has evolved somewhat over the years, and I will begin my comments by saying we plan to revisit this mission statement as well in the next 12 months. While we will continue to strive to develop Arlington as an economically vital, competitive, and sustainable community to the business, real estate, tourism, and cultural affairs sectors of the economy, we would like to amend this mission statement to add an equity component, which has been a major focus not only for Arlington County, but within AED, and I'll touch on some of that later. And so I just wanted to share with you that that is part of our goal for the upcoming year. I'll begin my comments with our communications team. And let me begin by sharing a few highlights from the work over the past year. The communications group provides marketing outreach for the department, which includes identifying target markets, developing messaging, and implementing marketing initiatives. This includes communication mediums such as public relations, advertising, multimedia, web, social media, business events, and outreach to the business community. The graphic that you see on the screen provides statistics on web traffic, public relations placement, social media impressions over the last year. What I will share is that web traffic continues to rise at a consistent rate from the previous years. However, AED's major priority in FY22 is completing its website redesign. That aligns very well with our marketing and current rebranding efforts. The redesign will include an increased search engine optimization, which will vastly increase the traffic to our website. And our website is, without question, our most critical marketing tool. Social media is also measured by the number of followers and impressions, and AED's metrics are expected to continue to increase as a result of the consistent paid advertising campaigns. There are a few budget reductions in media monitoring software that will affect our ability to track public relations earned media impressions associated with the equivalence of advertising purchases. However, AED will continue to track media mentions through organic search mechanisms. Moving on to our real estate development group, affectionately known as Red Dog. They were part of the core county team that developed and implemented emergency regulatory relief for restaurants, including the allowance of pickup and drop-off locations, or PUDOs, and expansion of outdoor seating capacity under the TOSA program, temporary outdoor seating areas. Red Dog took the lead on developing guidelines for the winterization of outdoor seating elements, as well as the development of the publicly accessible temporary outdoor seating areas. And that's PTOSAs, not to be confused with TOSA. Additionally, Red Dog was the primary author and collaborator with CPHD to implement the administrative guidance for office conversions. The first application of that guidance has occurred during the PDSP and SP amendment for Potomac Yard Land-Based C. AED is currently working with CPHD to develop a scope of work to address increased flexibility of commercial ground floor uses in the form-based code along Columbia Pike. The staff analysis and public process has begun in FY21, and we anticipate the county bringing documents back to the county board for consideration in early FY22. Shifting to BizLaunch, our BizLaunch team, which is responsible for supporting our small businesses within Arlington, they began FY 2020 with the traditional in-person counseling activities and events. Topics addressed included how to survive a disaster, cybersecurity, launch and learn on Columbia Pike, and more. After the pandemic hit in March, BizLaunch went completely virtual. Offering online webinars, conferences took place in lieu of in-person activities. The campaigns to celebrate local businesses were launched, as well as cross-county collaboration on initiatives from signage, takeout orders, and coordinating delivery options for local businesses. Training was conducted on federal loan programs, as well as how to pivot successfully in the midst of a pandemic. The BizLaunch team met with organizations and partnered with the BIDS, partnerships, Chamber of Commerce, and others, as well as regional groups who touch small businesses. There were 119 events planned, and beginning in mid-March, 29 events were virtual, including SCORE, our volunteers from SCORE. BizLaunch counseled 1,256 businesses, with 250 of those businesses being directly related to COVID-19 counseling efforts. We had 3,531 clients view our webinars after the event, and there were a total of 8,643 participants in BizLaunch programming overall, with a total of over 66,000 since the year 2002. I'll now move on to ACVS, which is our Convention and Visitor Services, and I'll keep my comments here brief because we will visit a section at the end of our presentation that is totally devoted to our hospitality and tourism market. But as a highlight, I want to share the data from calendar year 2019, which is the last year of available reporting. We won't get the 2020 numbers in aggregate until fall of this year. So in calendar year 2019, according to the Virginia Tourism Corporation, Arlington visitors generated a record $97.8 million in tax revenue for the county, which includes both direct and indirect and induced impact. I will touch on some of the mitigation measures later. As we know, due to extreme drop in visitation during the COVID-19 pandemic, these revenues will look very different in the year 2020. Also, the metrics are dramatically lower than they were in the previous fiscal year, and due to disproportionate impacts, as I mentioned earlier, we expect also some of the web sessions to decline as well, and group room nights were booked. They were declining in their rates of booking in as compared to FY 2019 as well. Briefly, I'll talk about our cultural affairs team. You see some of the statistics there on the screen. Our cultural affairs team had to pivot as well in the midst of the pandemic to a virtual distribution model. Their Arlington Arts at Home series was directed to still provide artistic engagement with citizens and visitors to Arlington from their homes. And it has been and continues to be a goal of the Cultural Affairs Department to take arts to the people and to expose every citizen within Arlington to arts and culture. Additionally, the team pivoted during the pandemic to sew thousands of masks that were provided through our partnership with the emergency operations team to employees and many people throughout the community. These were cloth face coverings that were sewn using equipment that typically they would use during their work with the costume shop to support the arts community. Lastly, I'll talk about our business investment group, affectionately known as the BIG team. Despite operating with a reduced staff there were a couple frozen positions during the year, which helped us realize some savings during FY21. The group continued to deliver on its annual jobs and square footage targets. To date, the BIG group in FY 2021 has accounted for 2,150 jobs in nearly 540,000 square feet of retained or new office space. Notable projects include Fortune 100 honoree and tech giant Microsoft, which announced it will locate its U.S. regulated industries team, including Microsoft Federal, to Roslyn's Commonwealth Tower. Microsoft will create 400 new jobs and occupy 180,000 square feet, with expected occupancy in mid-2022. From a retention standpoint, the BIG team worked on securing a commitment with the U.S. Department of State to renew their lease for another 20 years at 1800 North Kent Street, where it has occupied 246,000 square feet since 2010. The agency is a major presence in Roslyn, where it leases more than 1.2 million square feet of office space. The retention of Roslyn's largest employer is a major success in Arlington's strategy to retain its federal leases and ensures that the Department of State employees will continue to support neighborhood businesses for years to come. Lastly, I'll mention as part of a larger deal to retain the U.S. headquarters of French shipping company CMA CGM Group in Norfolk, the company will establish the American hub of ZBox, a startup incubator and accelerator in the National Landing area, which they will take about 15,000 square feet. Additionally, BIG has carried out nearly 500 business engagement activities with Arlington businesses this fiscal year to date. And these engagements include everything from semi-annual welcome events for new businesses, Arlington Premier, and targeted business retention visits, connecting companies with other businesses and resources, and promotional and marketing opportunities, including webinars. As you will see, this slide summarizes the activity of over the last 6 years. Much of this work can be attributed to the hard work of our BIG team, and it validates the importance of our diversification strategy to diversify away from solely federal government clients and contractors to a more broad base of technology companies, associations, nonprofits, and entrepreneurs, which strengthens our regional economy. We continue to monitor our vacancy trends. This slide that you see in front of you shows you what has happened with regard to vacancy over the last 8 years. While the vacancy rate was encouraging and has been encouraging since, I would say, 2015, when it reached its height of more than 20%, we have seen a slight uptick during the COVID season. At the end of last calendar year, 2020, we were sub 15% vacancy. We now see a vacancy rate of about 17.7%. These challenges are on a global scale, and long-term impacts are still yet to be determined, therefore requiring an agile approach to our economic development work. I want to share some headwinds, not to frighten you, but these are things that we keep on our radar as we are operating in economic development. These are areas in which represent potential risk for us, and that we work to mitigate those risks through our programming and our strategy. Let me begin with uncertainty around the office market. With roughly 8 million square feet of leased office space, the federal government continues to be a major occupier of Arlington real estate. The county remains vulnerable as GSA seeks to lower costs through cheaper office space or consolidation and shifting to more remote workforce post-pandemic. Due to prior GSA decisions, the county is facing immediate challenges as over 925,000 square feet of office space will be vacated between November of 2020 and March 2021. Absent positive absorption, this would add nearly 2 percentage points to our commercial vacancy rates. Many of these expiring GSA leases were not a surprise to us, as we were aware that as these leases expired, many of them would not be renewing. We've known that for some years now. Also, an increase in remote working with an ever-improving technology. The rise in remote work that began even before COVID-19 is now being accelerated due to mostly positive experiences of employers and employees, according to surveys, including PwC's U.S. Remote Work Survey. PwC's survey indicated that while most executives prefer returning to the office in some form, 13% responded that they are prepared to let go of the office for good. Interestingly, 56% expect the need for more office space versus 31% that expect a reduced footprint. So as you see, we're seeing a little bit of a mixed bag of views on the future of office space, as some companies are moving ahead with major office deals like Amazon, Microsoft, and Raytheon, while others are attempting to sublease space as they either downsize their presence. Northern Virginia remains a highly attractive market for both startup and industry-leading tech companies due to the existing talent pool, the talent pipeline investments, venture capital access, and federal government proximity. Recent real estate decisions by Amazon, Facebook, Google, and Microsoft have increased national awareness of these assets while the rankings of the region's startup ecosystem and tech talent have shifted favorably as well. However, the competitive landscape is constantly shifting, with emerging secondary markets poised to capture demand by offering lower living and real estate costs. And let me pause here to thank the county manager for including dollars, I believe $550,000 as part of the contribution to the Northern Virginia Community College. Previously, those funds were directed to their capital budgets. And I believe the General Assembly now allows for those funds to be repurposed. And this year, this FY22 budget includes funds that will go toward working with Arlington Public Schools and Northern Virginia Community College to develop early college programming and career pathways for students so that they can earn college credit while they are still attending high school. Let's talk a little bit about some of the changes in our commercial market sectors. Vacancy will not be the only critical metric. Rent and thus the value of properties of occupied square footage could shift. The Nova office market will remain challenged as high supply submarkets compete for limited tenant demand. Already observed significant weaknesses in the DC market flows directly to rent positioning and square footage capture in Arlington. Tenant decisions to further embrace virtual working environment and relooking at required space per employees and shifting to more convening models for physical locations is something we're also tracking. Tenant space usage may further depress rents per square foot as those willing to pay less for square footage for greater distancing and common areas within tenant spaces become more common. Likely, we will see interest in different uses and types of tenancy for vacant office space. Proactive flexibility on uses will be key. I want to emphasize how key the office conversion flexibility work was that we partnered with CPHD. And then the next phase of that will look at other office flexibility and usage flexibility as far as our regulatory environment is concerned. On the bright side, let's talk a little bit about the Amazon effect. $1 billion in value for HQ2 phase 1. And of course, phase 2 is in the planning process, having recently submitted preliminary site plans. Specific tenant types will view Arlington and National Landing specifically as a unique and somewhat insulated from broader market conditions. Let's focus a little bit on ground floor commercial and other retail spaces. We expect to see a consumer spending spike post-pandemic. Businesses the businesses that remain and are left standing will enjoy the benefits of what we describe as a V-shaped recovery. However, on a per square foot basis, shifts in the density of use sales and interior spaces will change retail economics relative to commercial uses. Also expect cautiousness of tenants to big lease commitments. So we'll be focused on, I would expect to see focus on shorter lease terms. With the loss of ground floor retail and restaurants due to COVID, this will accelerate the need for ground floor flexibility to react to near-term challenges, but also reflect the changing nature of commerce. In the multifamily market, we're already in the midst of seeing a down cycle led by overbuilding. There are slower lease ups and increased stabilized vacancy, rent and some rent depression as well. Pandemic impacts on the demand on exacerbating a down cycle condition will have to wait and see impacts of consumers choosing alternative locations if virtual work environments take hold. Placemaking and retail vitality are going to be key to the value proposition of why people will pay to live in Arlington. With more requests for flexible use, and particularly temporary hotel uses are what we are seeing currently in the market. There is pent-up demand for condos, which could partially fill some of that void, assuming interest rates stay low. I think that I want to re-emphasize the placemaking and how important that is to the economic development strategy and the attractiveness of Arlington to not only businesses but residents. And I think it underscores the importance of the work that our Cultural Affairs Division is undertaking. With regard to hotels, closures and conversions have occurred, resulting in a drop in inventory. We expect to continue to see impacts on the hospitality industry. Recovery dependent upon many uncertain factors, including vaccinations, public health regulations, business travel, policies, etc. Leisure travel is expected to return earlier, but pace of more economically impactful business, meeting groups, and group travel is expected to lag into 2024. From a small business standpoint, overall, Arlington's small business ecosystem is doing very well. However, due to the current health pandemic, certain industries continue to struggle with access to capital. We'll talk more about this later in the presentation. COVID-19 continues to directly impact those businesses which are restricted by the number of customers that can come in their doors and patronize their business, particularly retail, restaurant, and hotel establishments. AED's most recent survey of small business, conducted in the fall, showed that 66% of respondents need capital for the following resources: 22% for technology assistance, 22% for health safety needs, 22% for general business operations, and 20% need legal assistance. I want to take a moment to take a glance at what's happening with regard to unemployment in Arlington. You will see the larger circles represent those sectors which are most greatly affected due to unemployment. Food prep, serving and sales management, personal service, those are all areas that we've seen the greatest amount of unemployment within Arlington. If we go to the next slide, you'll see that the labor force is down by about 4.4%, which is about 7,000 workers. And although Arlington has fared much better than many of our neighbors in the region due to the nature of the work in Arlington, much of it does allow it to be transitioned to virtual work much better than some of our competing locales. Full recovery will take longer if we don't recover some of those 7,000 workers that have either vacated the labor force in Arlington. So as we think about the challenges that face us, I'd like to take a moment to look back at what we've learned over the last year. And I want to start with some report outs from the Small Business Emergency Grant. We received more than 1,100 applications and were able to award $2.8 million to 393 businesses, thanks to the appropriation from Arlington County, the Industrial Development Authority, all three of the business improvement districts, and also an additional appropriation from the Arlington COVID funds. Each of these businesses were required to submit an end-of-year report. Actually, it was due January 31st, which detailed how they spent the funds and the status of their business. Of the 393 grantees, 351 businesses were still open. 15 were temporarily closed with plans to reopen, and to date, 16 have notified us of permanent closure. By our calculation, 91% of those grant recipients are still open for business. The motivation for creating the program really was to keep as many businesses open to sustain themselves through the pandemic and to keep as many employees on staff during this time. As you will see from the graphic on the right, although there was a dip in employment between February and April, we did see a rebound in employment, number of employees from those grant recipients by the end of the year. As far as what the funds were used towards, we were pleased to see that the top two categories for which grant funds were used were payroll and rent and mortgage assistance. This was by design. The program's intent was to provide resources for small business to use to keep their employees employed and also to keep their doors open. And we have a quote there from one of our small businesses that was very gracious to Arlington County for the support that they received through this program. These images here represent some of the activity that was experienced over the last year, including a grant recipient, Compass Coffee, one of our artists who depicted this piece of work, Courage, which I think is very appropriate considering what we've had to deal with over the last year. And then the tourism recovery campaign that was led by the ACVS team within AED to target toward leisure travelers and helping them find fresh air to still come to Arlington, but to do it in a safe and socially distant manner by finding outdoor fresh air activities that they could take part in during this time. Beyond the pandemic, while leasing activity declined in 2020, recent reports from the real estate community indicate there are increasing activity levels within the market and a strong sense that pent-up demand will lead to numerous deals in late 2021 and early 2022, assuming the vaccine rollout goes smoothly in the coming months. Based on our conversations with companies and the broker community, we expect to see companies returning to the office in the fall timeframe, when the population is widely vaccinated and public schools are back in session. In the long run, I wouldn't say there's a clear consensus on what the future office needs will be at large scale, as individual companies' plan range from fully remote work to a hybrid solution that include expanded footprints to account for social distancing and hygiene-related dedensification of the office space. Segments of Arlington's key industries have weathered the pandemic very well, as reports from the government, contracting, and technology industries have generally indicated positive growth. Conversely, association and nonprofit industry is facing budgetary challenges, as organizations are unable to host conferences and events, which are typically key revenue generators for those sectors. From a business attraction standpoint, it's going to be critical that we continue to keep our proverbial foot on the accelerator, if you will. Specific planned activities include the renewal of external lead generation services to identify 25 to 30 qualified leads, strategic engagement of the broker and site selector communities, and preparing for the return to in-person marketing missions. From a retention and expansion standpoint, with out-of-market activity slowed by the pandemic, the business development team will continue to enhance its retention and expansion toolkit and increase connections within Arlington. Planned efforts include key industry roundtables, recurring profiles on tech startups, and strategic engagement of fast-growing companies to identify workforce challenges and to develop targeted solutions. The Real Estate Development Group will continue to work with the core county team to review and consider permanent applications and elements of the emergency regulatory relief, delivery services of pickup and drop-off locations, TOSAs, and PTOSAs. The Real Estate Development Group will also have a key role in working with CPHD on elements of their work plan that address increased flexibility for building investments and repositionings in response to an increasingly more competitive regional office market. We will continue to also work with the business improvement districts on creative solutions to neighborhood level investments and activation. From a cultural affairs standpoint, COVID has accelerated trends in the arts field to a hybrid model of in-person and digital content distribution, serialization and erosion of the line separating art and entertainment, commercial and nonprofit activity. We will see this post-pandemic as well. New audiences have been generated for arts organizations as a result of the virtual work during the pandemic, and it is certainly the intent of staff to continue to support a more diverse audience base through our cultural affairs programming. The arts philanthropy has increased as well, and is focusing on equity, diversity, and inclusion. There's an increased focus on placemaking as well as part of the desire to keep Arlington as an attractive place, not only for residents, visitors, and also for businesses. I will highlight that the Cultural Affairs Division has recently invested in audio-visual equipment technology to continue to deliver professional quality productions through their Theater on the Run services. And we look to be able to share more information in the coming months with our arts community. Additionally, we are now accepting applications for the Relaunch program, which is our small business community support initiative designed to provide sustainable support for businesses and long-term beyond the pandemic. The actual engagement of these businesses will start happening as of March 22nd, but as of I believe just this week, businesses can start submitting interest for assistance, one-on-one technical assistance with marketing and business. They also can receive assistance on online presence and e-commerce solutions for those businesses that currently don't have online presence. Additionally, staff is already started thinking through and working on plans for the COVID-19 contingency that's included in the county manager's proposed FY22 budget. The three areas that are currently our focus for new ideas include small business, our business attraction, expansion, and recovery marketing, and our tourism and hospitality sector. I'd be remiss if I didn't talk some about our focus on equity in AED. Department-wide, we participated and facilitated conversations around racial equity and awareness throughout the entire month of August. We developed as a output from that effort, we developed our own AED racial equity team, which consists of 10 employees from AED nominated by their fellow staff members. They will be working on coming up with strategies that promote racial equity and awareness with not only within AED, but within the community, and will keep us on our toes with regard to examining the programs that we operate from a racial equity perspective within the department. Our ACVS team launched Arlington Spotlights, an ongoing interview series featuring African American community leaders and their unique experiences and perspectives. It's one of many continuing initiatives to expand and elevate content honoring Arlington's Black history and culture throughout state Arlington communication channels. Our ACVS Director of Sales, Portia Connolly, was named by the National Tour Association as chair of the NTA Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Advisory Group. We're very proud of her. From our cultural affairs standpoint, I'll highlight two projects specifically that dealt with equity. The John Robinson Jr. Town Square project, designed by award-winning African-American landscape architect and artist Walter Hood, a 2019 recipient of the MacArthur Fellowship Genius Grant. And also in Metropolitan Park Public Art, an African-American woman named Nikisha Durrett, who is from this region, is one of 3 artists chosen for a major new public art effort. Also included in our, one more thing I'll mention about our art, as far as our public art master plan, there is a new section included in the public art master plan that's been updated to reflect equity. And they've developed, and our Arts Commission has actually developed an equity statement as well. Let's move on to BizLaunch. Our small business has done an amazing work supporting small women and minority-owned businesses, also known as SWAM. This past year was the inaugural SWAMmies Awards event in partnership with the Commonwealth of Virginia, which was held in October 2020. BizLaunch also collaborated with Department of Management and Finance for SWAM businesses on how to do business with the government in Northern Virginia. The BizLaunch team has also engaged in a TikTok marketing campaign for Black-owned businesses and also other businesses within Arlington, women-owned businesses this month, actually, to help promote small business, as they oftentimes do not have the capital necessary to engage in complex marketing campaigns. The BizLaunch team also supported the sponsorship of Washington, D.C.'s 2021 Black Entrepreneurs Pitch event. At this time, I'm going to ask our Operations Director, Ifiok Abanga, to come and summarize our budget and reductions.
Thank you, Tally. Good afternoon. I will be speaking on our budget summary and reductions. Like other departments in the county, AED had to absorb some reductions in the proposed budget, which include a $64,000 reduction in the trade and promotion marketing resources budget and $28,000 reduction in the administrative operating budget. Before I go into those reductions, I wanted to say that AED's revenue budget remains unchanged from FY21. Our hope is that with more people getting vaccinated, we'll be able to open the cultural affairs facilities. Our trade and promotion marketing resources budget is primarily used for activities promoting business attraction, business retention, assisting small businesses, and providing support to businesses engaged in the creative sectors of the local economy. Consequently, the $64,000 reduction will mean that there are less funds available for some of the activities that we use to promote Arlington County. This may mean hosting fewer pop-up events for artisans in the community, sponsoring fewer networking opportunities and events, and reducing the social media custom targeted outreach to specific audiences, which will result in the need to broaden media efforts that are typically more costly and less effective. In the administrative operating budget, the reduction of the operating budget reduces funding for departmental data subscriptions, office and operating supplies, memberships, and a reduction in training and travel funding. AED will prioritize spending on memberships that support lead generation and destination sales marketing. And now Tally will provide you with an overview of Arlington Convention and Visitor Service.
Thank you, Ifiok. The Convention and Visitor Services program is funded by 0.25% of the Transit Occupancy Tax, TOT. The Arlington Convention and Visitor Service is the county's official destination marketing organization, promoting Arlington to meeting and event planners nationwide and to domestic and international leisure travelers. As a reminder, Arlington has been the #1 county in Virginia for travel economic impact since 2009. These 2019 impact numbers from Virginia Tourism Corporation reflect the county's highest performing year for tourism ever. Unfortunately, due to the impacts of COVID-19, due to the COVID-19 pandemic, it's taken a devastating toll on the travel industry. Pre-pandemic, the travel-dependent leisure and hospitality sector accounted for 11% of all employment within the U.S., yet it has suffered 39% of all pandemic-related job loss since February of 2020. With Arlington's 2020 hotel occupancy down nearly 60%, our hotels and the nearby businesses that benefit from their guests have suffered tremendous losses, necessitating the many layoffs of longtime team members. To stimulate an accelerated recovery for Arlington's hospitality sector, it will be critical for the county to continue to invest in sales and marketing, which inspires more hotel stays as quickly as possible. From a budget summary standpoint, the FY22 proposed budget reflects a 21% decrease from FY21 adopted budget due to lower projections from TOT of approximately $463,000, which is offset by a one-time increase from the general fund transfer of $206,000. The proposed budget reduction will lead to reduced investments in marketing, sales, technology, and professional development. I'd like to also, before I talk about the last budget considerations, I'd like to make it a point that we had many internal conversations with county leadership and with our DMF department strategically about how to position ourselves for recovery with regard to hospitality and tourism. And I have to commend the county manager and thank him for his approach to doing everything he could to retain all filled positions within the team, such that as the market begins to recover, we are positioned and have staff in place to aid and accelerate that recovery. We're very appreciative of that. Regarding some of the key budget considerations, we all share excitement of last year when the sunset clause was removed from Arlington's transient occupancy tax surcharge in the General Assembly, ensuring a permanent funding stream for travel and for tourism promotion. However, none of us could have predicted the downside that this funding model that's becoming evident in a once-in-a-lifetime global pandemic. This has created a depletion of tourism and hospitality funds at a time when we probably most need it. Additionally, as we emerge from the pandemic, competition for meetings and groups and leisure travelers is more fierce than ever. We will strategically attempt to increase our sales and marketing investment, which will be critical to recovery for Arlington's hotels and small businesses. Lastly, I'll say that the current industry projections indicate we may not return to 2019 performance levels until at least 2024. The sooner Arlington can resume investing in a robust tourism sales and marketing platform, the better we will be able to mitigate some of our long-term losses. This concludes AED's presentation, and we are happy to take any questions or comments from the board.
Thank you, Mr. Tucker, and I'm glad that you've this year gotten the chance to present, as well as thank you to your colleague and for the presentation. We are going to come to questions. We do have a couple of commissions that we will hear from, so the first of those, we have our business improvement districts, and we have starting with the Ballston bid. I believe Tina Leone is here. Is Ms. Leone?
Greetings. Thank you all for the opportunity to be here today with you. I want to first thank Kate Payne and Shannon Flanagan Watson for their support and guidance through the whole work plan and budgeting process. This fiscal year 22 budget for the Ballston bid represents a 6.4% reduction in revenue from the prior year, from this current year. It's important to note that our tax assessment funding for this bid has either remained flat or actually gone down in 6 of the last 10 years. We've had, and that's due to some of our member buildings leaving the bid, in other words, converting from office or retail into apartments, which are not included in our bid. Also, we've seen a lot of adjustments due to market conditions of the office buildings as well. So this budget now returns the Ballston bid to fiscal year 14 funding levels, and as a result, we had to eliminate 2 full-time positions. So we are down to a staff of 4 people. That being said, we are going forth with our programs and by program area, marketing and promotion going forward, we were just told to highlight some of the things that we'll be doing next year. In addition to our general promotion for the Ballston bid, we're going to continue to support our neighborhood companies coming back to work as they re-enter their offices. We just did a recent survey, and 52% of Ballston companies are in a hybrid form right now, as reflecting a lot of what Mr. Tucker has said. They are between home and office. 25% of our companies still have no set plans for returning. So this again reflects that uncertainty that he mentioned as well. Also, in addition to continuing to support our restaurant and retailers, we want to continue that boosting of consumer confidence. We launched Ballston Cares Back to Work, Eat, Shop, and Play campaign last summer. So we are continuing that, but we're gonna boost that even further with more public communications around, using advertising, traditional and social media, and of course our influencers, which have become critical to our marketing success as well. Just continuing to encourage people to get out and shop and eat and patronize our businesses. On placemaking, we have completed our placemaking plan this year. Again, thanks to Kate Payne and her guidance on that. It's a placemaking art and cultural plan. We hadn't done that since our very inception, almost 8-9 years ago. So we will be coming back to you shortly, we hope, in the next several months, to approve a standard for streetscape furniture in Ballston. We have a lot of hodgepodge of things going on. Our board approved a standard look for our furniture and our parklets, etc. And Kate will be working with us on that process. Our goal is to, of course, to implement these projects and activities that we identify in this placemaking plan, although it's quite a challenge with the limited budget that we have. We understand everyone's in this position now, but our position is systemic. So again, we do have our major project, the installation of the interactive light art project in the Ballston Metro canopy. I've been talking about this for a long time, about 7 years. I'm so glad to be partnering with Arlington County Public Art on that project. That is underway. Its design phase is about complete. Fabrication will begin soon, and installation this fall. So we're very excited about that major project. Events will continue to host socially distanced web-based events, and hopefully expand to in-person as the government allows. We have a pent-up demand for that as well. We surveyed over 500 residents and employees here in Ballston, and the survey is actually still open. We just opened it a few days ago, and that just reveals that 50% of our constituency is ready for outdoor events right now. Another 16%, or a total of 66%, are comfortable going in May. So I believe as we see the vaccine more widely distributed, obviously people are getting more and more comfortable. We also received resounding support for pedestrian-only days on Wilson Boulevard. We have been talking to Kate and Shannon about this, and we know that there's some difficulties maybe with buses, but we want to still continue that. We're going to pilot a program for once a month and shutting down part of Wilson Boulevard for our residents and employees. And finally, probably the most important thing we'll be working on is exploring the possibility of expanding the bid membership through the addition of the commercial apartments and or possibly geographically into Virginia Square, which seems very timely with George Mason and their innovation campus that they're building. It creates we can create an innovation district. So again, I want to thank the county team for their, they've already started to discuss with us what that process will look like. So again, we're in the exploratory phase, and thank you so much for this opportunity to talk to you today.
Thank you, Ms. Leone, for your presentation and for working through. Every time I go by the Ballston Metro and see that project underway, it's very much appreciated, and not an easy year, but eager to get back in person for certain. So we may have questions. But for now, we'll go on to the next of our bids. And I believe next we'll have Tracy Gabriel with the National Landing bid.
Good afternoon, Chair DeFerrante and members of the board. I'm Tracy Gabriel, and it is a pleasure to be here today to represent the National Landing Business Improvement District. Thank you for the opportunity to discuss our major accomplishments of this fiscal year and our priorities for fiscal year 2022. In fiscal year 2021, our priorities principally focused around the building of a new organization to meet the shared interests of the business communities of Crystal City, Pentagon City, and Potomac Yard. And despite the uncertainty and challenging environment that was presented by the pandemic, the National Landing Bid has succeeded in launching a new organization, ramping up staff to support the extension of our services to a larger district, and demonstrating value to our stakeholders and to the county of a unified vision for a vibrant, connected, and urban downtown district. And over the past year, we have sought to adapt to the challenges brought on by the pandemic, and we really appreciate the county's support and partnership in pivoting our programming to meet the needs of our community during COVID. And so while our perspective and outlook are certainly more hopeful looking forward, our FY22 work plan and priorities also aim to address the impacts of the pandemic to our area. So our first priority is to focus on recovery and resilience, exploring how to adapt to evolving markets and a return to office while offering small business support through a variety of tools, including marketing and direct assistance, such as small business grants. So at the same time, though, with $8 billion of private investment in the pipeline, we will continue to tell the area's compelling transformation story through the lens of National Landing's inherent resilience and innovation. And secondly, we'll continue to focus on cultivating a connected and activated downtown through a range of virtual and in-person events and strategic public realm investments. We'll also continue to focus on next generation mobility by launching a wayfinding initiative and leveraging transportation investments already in progress, like the CC to DCA intermodal connector, a reimagined Route 1, and a new Long Bridge. Finally, and perhaps most important to the success of our downtown long term, is to build a strong, welcoming organization and business community. Elevating equity, diversity, and inclusion in our efforts and in all aspects of the organization remains a top priority. So at the same time, building stronger business to business and bid to county connections will serve to enhance our collective ability to drive positive outcomes for our district. So as the county board and county staff review our work in the coming year, we will continue to seek flexibility in how we approach our budget and programming in order to innovate to meet the needs of our stakeholders and our downtown district. Thank you very much for the ongoing partnership of our county agencies, and I look forward to the year ahead and happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Say Gabriel. I appreciate your presentation, and we may also have questions. If you would just stay with us a little bit, we'll come back after getting presentation next from Mary Claire Burek with the Roslyn Bid president. Mary Claire.
Yes, hi. Thank you, everyone. I really appreciate the time today. Let me grab my remarks really quickly. I thought I had them up. There we go. So I think like many of you, we're seeing a renewed energy and a desire for the reopening, which is exciting to us. And our work plan really does reflect that momentum. So this really is a transition year for us. And we're really focusing kind of on three big things, and that is placemaking improvements for our parks and open spaces, supporting the reopening of the neighborhood, and then of course, continued support for our restaurants and retail. So we know that being outside is essential to our well-being, and I think it's vital to recovery. So we're really using placemaking techniques to create desirable open spaces that really help to inspire people. We want them to think about our parks differently and in new ways, and we want them to think of them as an extension of their homes and offices. So it's been a great partnership with park staff. We've done initiatives such as O2 for outdoor office and the interim dog park have really helped us to begin to realize that vision. And I will say with this new energy around the park, we strongly support the launch of a master planning effort for the park, and we really hope that that does remain a priority for the upcoming CIP. Moving on to reopening activities. So we plan to relaunch and enhance the Roslyn Ready Toolkit and the resources that we created last March to really ensure that safe return for the business community. Our business engagement program has been vitally important so that we can keep a pulse on what our businesses are doing, what do they need, and we will continue that work. We also see events as an important part of the recovery and community wellness. So we're working in partnership with the Special Events Committee at the county, and we've planned a very robust lineup of events, and they're all scalable so that we know that we can meet COVID restrictions as they continue to evolve. Finally, our restaurants and retailers, they're the heart of our street life, and they're essential to healthy leasing and retention of our businesses. So we really see that as essential to continue that support. And so we plan to dedicate resources towards rewarding patronage at our restaurants and continued efforts to drive traffic. And I will say the temporary outdoor seating permits, the pickup drop-off zones, the signage, all those things Kelly talked about that the county implemented, they really have been critical for those businesses. And so we hope that you'll consider supporting permanently enabling those measures where appropriate. In closing, I wanted to just highlight two things that I think are really low cost but high impact, just some areas for exploration. And those include partnership and just a mindset. Roslyn has benefited greatly from projects only achievable through partnership with county departments. So whether it's standing up an outdoor office in a dog park, supporting small businesses through grants, adding traffic elements, we really have been able to leverage resources at both of our organizations to increase the impact of every dollar and every staff hour spent. So I think that's well worth continuing. And in terms of mindset, I really applaud the county for the willingness to try new concepts. The way the staff has pivoted during this crisis has been incredible. So whether it's a TOSA or creating a more efficient approval process for events, a speedier and more inclusive online SPRC process, which has received really great feedback, or just simply staff considering new ways to get something done while still honoring the intent of a certain policy or a plan. These are all positive and impactful shifts in mindset that don't cost much, but I think they really are producing meaningful results. So I hope we continue to support and encourage this attitude at all levels. So thank you again for making time for us today, and just know that we stand in partnership, make sure that our community comes out stronger than ever.
Thank you, Ms. Burek. And that's a great note to transition on. Just one piece of the American Rescue Plan that I think all three of you, as well Tracy and Tina, all three of you may want to note that there is, I don't know the shape of it, but there is significant investment in restaurants, which have been so decimated in that plan. And so we'll be, like you, we'll be eager to learn more because of what Telly mentioned with the employment impacts and the challenges so many of our restaurants have faced. So if you're able to hang with us, we may have questions. Thank you very much for the presentation. Really appreciate your work. We will go on now to CPRO, the Columbia Pike Revitalization Organization, and Kim Klingler.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Matt, and thank you for giving CPRO the opportunity to address you today. I did send a two-pager to you all yesterday, so please let me know if you have any questions regarding that or my remarks today. CPRO is incredibly grateful that the county has partnered with us to provide us with essential funding. This funding is so crucial as we work to maintain and expand the services and programming that we are offering the Columbia Pike community. As was mentioned in earlier presentations, our community is quite diverse, and our diverse residents and businesses have been significantly impacted by COVID. Our community expects and benefits and continues to benefit from many of our programs. Our free blues festival this past year hit the radio. This year will actually be a hybrid event, both streaming and in person. Our virtual Pike Progress Luncheon, our farmers market where we set up an e-commerce platform to support grab and go, free drive-in movies, which hopefully will continue again this year, and our virtual Parcel on the Pike. As Telly mentioned, before COVID, we've really put some pieces in place that have proven to be extremely valuable. We've developed enhanced partnerships with the Chamber, AED, BizLaunch, and others. We conducted our Launch and Learn with BizLaunch, with CPRO providing the translation services. The Columbia Pike Commercial Market Study and Columbia Pike Form-Based Code Position Paper were published. And we leveraged our partnership with Marymount to bring on a bilingual intern specializing in business engagement. During COVID, we quickly learned, as many here have noted, that businesses and our residents needed help. We were able to pivot, the word of the day, and have been fortunate to save money due to reduced rent and lack of in-person events. In partnership with the county, AED Biz Launch, and other organizations, our savings, as well as additional fundraising, has gone directly to supporting small local businesses while addressing food insecurity and other community needs. Our Buy a Nurse Lunch program has supported our restaurants for the past 11 months, delivering over 4,000 meals to Arlington Pediatric Center, Arlington Free Clinic, Mary Marshall Assisted Living, and VHC. We are also, like others, supporting our restaurants with free banners and tosas and blanket programs. Our Feed Our Families program supported our farmers while delivering 4,500 boxes of produce to families at Gilliam Place, Harvey Hall, and Our Lady Queen of Peace. And through the generosity of the Washington Forest Foundation, we have been able to bring on a part-time bilingual business engagement specialist who has been essential in engaging and supporting our businesses, also producing Bulletin de Columbia Pike, which is a resource newsletter for our Latinx business community, and would love to expand that. We have also welcomed the Black Heritage Museum of Arlington into our space. And as for future priorities and plans, it is truly crucial that we continue to expand our multilingual and legacy business engagement and support. In order to do so, we are looking at additional funding sources, and we recognize that we may have to make some trade-offs in the future, potentially rent or free in-person events. And we hope we don't have to make that call, but we just want to share that with our community. And finally, we don't want to lose the vision and momentum of the Columbia Pike Commercial Market Studies 16M and the Amazon Effect, and therefore we will continue to keep convening, prioritizing, and planning. We greatly appreciate your time and your support and your leadership, and thank you for letting us speak today.
Thank you, Ms. Klingler, and thank you for your relentless dedication. You seem often to be everywhere online, and really appreciate it. Thanks for the presentation. We may have questions. If you can hang out electronically, that'd be great. We will proceed, though, next to Ginger Brown with the Lee Highway Alliance. Ms. Brown.
Hi, good evening, Chair DeFerranti and members of the County Board. Thank you for having me. First, I would like to say thank you to Susan Sirocco for her support and guidance through the budget process. Lee Highway is on the precipice of having a bold new vision and hopefully a new name. Once implemented, Plan Lee Highway will help to build the quality of life of its residents by fighting climate change at the local level, creating diverse new housing options, expanding green space and placemaking opportunities, increasing the customer base for our small businesses, and improving walkability and transportation options. It will also expand the commercial tax base. LHA is the on-the-ground partner of Arlington County through AED, and we will help guide and implement the bold new vision. We'll also continue to support our struggling businesses through the recovery from the global pandemic. We look forward to continuing this partnership in fiscal year 2022, and we respectfully request that the proposed budget be raised to meet LHA's basic administrative and overhead costs at the minimum to our fiscal year 2021 levels. It's imperative that the funding become ongoing. Uncertainty every year is destabilizing. Our work plan includes supporting the Plan Lee Highway process through implementation and supporting the county's vision and comprehensive plan. Plan Lee Highway kicked off in 2019 after many years of grassroots organizing by LHA. The vision will guide long-term public and private investment for the next 30 years, and after 9 long years of hard work, LHA will help shepherd this through the finish line in fiscal year 2022 and begin the implementation. LHA also partners and promotes numerous county initiatives, including Vision Zero, Housing Arlington, and the Missing Middle, the Realizing Arlington's Commitment to Equity Initiative, Stormwater Management Planning, and the Complete Vaccination Committee. LHA will continue to be a reliable partner in fiscal year 2022. We will continue to market the assets of the corridor and support our small businesses. LHA engages many of our 268th Street level local Lee Highway businesses. In 2019, we kicked off a Loving Local campaign to encourage shopping, dining, and other activities along the corridor, and we plan to expand this program in fiscal year 2022. We are continually redesigning our website to increase interactivity, growing our newsletter subscriber base, developing more frequent relevant content, and expanding our social media. We are also the on-the-ground resource for those businesses who need assistance solving issues through their connection with our connection with AED. LHA will continue to help create a vibrant community through placemaking initiatives. We're hosting educational forums on placemaking, advocating for local artists by marketing pop-up markets, events, and murals. We brought 2 murals to the corridor in the last year. We also will promote multimodal programs by hosting Lee Highway's first Bike to Work pit stop, and we will continue to support and sponsor local neighborhood events such as the Waverly Hills Light the Night Halloween Parade and John M. Langston's Neighborhood Day celebrations. These are just a few of the highlights that we will accomplish in 2022. This is an exciting time to serve as a leader in the Lee Highway transformation. And so thank you for your continued support through the fiscal year 2022 budget process.
Thank you, Ms. Brown, for your presentation and the hopeful note of legislation before the governor, as well as your continued commitment and leadership for the Lee Highway Alliance. Really do appreciate it. I know each of us does. And we may have questions, but we will try and continue with the presentations first. So if you're able to stay with us, that would be wonderful. Thank you. Next, we'll go to Janae Padmore, Executive Director of the Clarendon Alliance. Ms. Padmore, are you there?
I am here. Thank you for having me. So, good evening. My name is Janae Padmore, and I'm the new Executive Director for Clarendon Alliance. I joined this wonderful organization the first week of February, and I come into this role with a background in community and economic development and nonprofit management. I'm eager to see what the Alliance and I will achieve. We understand the effects of the pandemic on our community. It has been a financial and emotional burden. Much like the rest of the county, we have worked to adapt to the environment that we were presented. Clarendon's strength and centrality in Arlington is vital to our county. And last year we requested $140,000 and received $80,000 in county funding. We feel if we use these funds effectively and resourcefully, but could do much more for our community with increased funding next year. This year, once again, we are requesting $140,000 for an overall increase of $60,000 from the past several funding cycles. In the past, we have increased outreach in our social media and revamped our website. We've also increased our membership strategy with new software to reach out to all of our members and to our Clarendon jurisdiction, Clarendon community. In addition, we hosted Clarendon Comes Together to support our neighbors, businesses, and frontline workers. In addition to hosting roundtable events to help our wonderful restaurants that are vital to our community. For the future, we plan for a financial sustainability and vitality of the organization and managed operations, so increased salary and benefits, and for our new part-time position in the future, and for compensation for the current executive director. In addition, we are looking to increase cover of our rent in our make office space, increase of $100,000 for new office equipment. And additionally, we're hoping to continue to actively engage with our Clarendon businesses, residents, and nonprofits to understand their needs and concerns. So developing new software and systems, market analysis targeting our Clarendon community, and interactive mapping for our businesses and events. In addition, we look to expand our program offerings and provide value to our members. Looking at establishing a speakers bureau and more roundtable events that will help our businesses and restaurants. Additionally, we're looking to promote Clarendon and its attributes to the greater Washington area. Increase of our advertising production and increase of advertising design and production for Clarendon marketing and membership materials that we can distribute widely. So as you know, we continue to want to build substantive relationships with government, civic groups, and other like-minded organizations. So our identity is ingrained in these mom and pop shops that have become an anchor to our neighborhood. Investing in Clarendon is key to assisting our small businesses, essential workers, and our growing populations. Investing in us is investing in our 50,000 residents and our 67,000 workers. This population is increasing, and we want to continue to be attractive to our visitors and residents. We are a trusted voice for Clarendon and Arlington County. We are dedicated to maintaining and strengthening that work with the businesses. Having additional funding will allow our businesses and residents to know that we care. Arlington cares and Clarendon cares. The money will allow us to continue our mission to boost our community and small businesses by being a central key to Clarendon. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Padmore, and welcome. I know we all not all of us have met in person, and also just appreciate your joining us and appreciate your report. We may have questions, but for now we'll continue to work through so that all of our partnerships and commissions can have a chance to present. Next is our Economic Development Commission Chair, Avril Usery-Sisk. Are you there? Yes, you are.
I am. How are you?
Fine.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, Chair DeFerrante and other members of the County Board and staff. Thank you for this opportunity to provide feedback from the Economic Development Commission and this work session at the County Manager's proposed fiscal year 2022 budget. I am Avril Usery-Sisk, and I'm here in my capacity as chair of the EDC. I have been serving on the EDC since 2018 and have been chair since January of this year. Our first order of business is to thank you for your investment in economic development. As you can see from the information just presented by AED, the resources provided in past years to AED, both in dollars and in personnel, and the work done by other county agencies to streamline processes to make doing business in Arlington easier, enabled AED to quickly pivot in order to address the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on businesses of all sizes within the county. This support has been demonstrated by the success of the Arlington Small Business Emergency Grant Program, of which you heard a little earlier. I was among several commissioners who worked alongside the AED staff, community volunteers, the BIDS, and the Industrial Development Authority to develop and administer the grant program. 6 commissioners read several hundred applications each, and we moved quickly to direct the funds to businesses as rapidly as possible. I am proud of how the grant program helped businesses from a wide variety of industry sectors and geographic locations within the county. But I'm particularly proud that a majority of the awardees are women, minority, and veteran-owned and disabled veteran-owned businesses. I believe I can speak for the commissioners who participated. We felt great fulfillment to be able to actively support our Arlington business community at this time of great disruption. It was very significant to all of us that we offered material assistance through the county's support for Arlington businesses. A great majority of the awardees remain open to date, 91%. We are thrilled by that result. The EDC would like to focus your attention on the fact that the hospitality sector in Arlington is suffering, and the downturn is having a significant impact on hotels, restaurants, and other small businesses that rely upon visitors. Arlington's 2020 hotel occupancy was at 30% instead of at 75% the way it was in 2019. Please consider this context. A hotel typically needs occupancy at 50 to 60% to break even. Leisure travel makes up approximately 25% of the hotel demand, while corporate, group, and government travel makes up most of the rest. These types of markets are being devastated right now, particularly in urban areas like Washington, D.C. and Arlington. This problem is so acute that if conditions do not turn around, lenders will become less patient, and we may start to see foreclosures. If we can hold out until June, when we assume the vaccine will have been more widely distributed, we stand a chance of a rebound. Unfortunately, while all of this is going on, in a vicious cycle, funding for the Arlington Convention and Visitors Service, the ACVS, has been cut. As a result, at the time of greatest need, the funding is the least. We request that the board consider ways to support ACVS and boost funding to restore targeted destination sales and marketing initiatives that will help ACVS aggressively retain and expand meeting, business, and leisure sales, and continue programs that strengthen Arlington's meeting and convention sales pipeline, the media exposure, and industry intelligence to speed our local recovery. In conclusion, I want to express our support for funding AED programs and initiatives, as well as an enhancement for funds that will enable additional sales and marketing efforts to promote Arlington's hospitality assets. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Usuri Sisk, for your leadership of the EDC and all the energy and experience we are lucky to have that you bring to the position, also for your presentation. I've been lucky to serve as liaison so far this year and just appreciate your leadership as well as the commission. So we have, if you'll just bear with us, we may have questions, but we have one more commission that we'll be presenting, and we'll go there first. And I believe it's our Arts Commission Chair, Anika Kiwanana. I think I have that right. Are you there, Ms. Kiwanana? Arts Commission. Is there an Arts Commission representative? Well, we have had quite a few commissions.
I think I saw her.
Chair, we saw Mr. Singh from the FAC who was on. I don't know if he was prepared to present.
Okay. Why don't we go ahead, Mr. Singh, go ahead, and then we'll come back and see if we can sort out the technology with our Arts Commission Chair.
Yeah, ironically, I wear multiple hats. I'm also on the EDC as the vice chair, so I was there presenting as a backup for a real chair of real, so I'm going to go off camera and hope you guys can proceed. Thank you.
Got it. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate it, Mr. Singh. So we'll go back. Anika, are you there? Madam Clerk, well, we will,
yes,
is she there or not?
She is not here. I will check on her attendance. If you would like to proceed, and I'll check with you.
Perfect. Thank you, Madam Clerk. So we will go ahead, and I now remember this day as always such a long day with so much content. And it's a challenge. We've tried to say thank you to all the presenters, but we will go around with comments. Please, if you presented, know that if we don't ask a question, that doesn't mean we didn't hear you. We are listening, and we've heard so much of your strengths and plans for next year. But colleagues will go ahead with a round of questions. And if you have them, I can also just start us with one big thanks to Mr. Tucker for reflecting that over the next 12 months, the desire will be to bring equity into the mission statement of Arlington Economic Development. And that is just wanted to really thank you for that work. It's crucial. I think the pandemic has revealed to all of us what a challenge and what we have needed to do as far as creating a more inclusive, equitable economy for all of us. So with that as a preface and a thanks to AED, I'll let colleagues go. And I think we started this time with permission. We'll start with Mr. Dorsey. And then go around as I see you on the list. Go ahead, Mr. Dorsey.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'll pick up where you left off. Do appreciate the work, Mr. Tucker, to think about equity and economic development. It's not often that those two are at least commonly thought of as being complementary, but certainly you have common cause with us board members who support that effort. I do want to ask how we actualize that with the business recruitment and retention efforts. So are we affirmatively informing people about the not only emphasis on equity from AED, but from within the county writ large, so that we begin to have employers seek to see themselves as partners in that work, begin to understand how they operate matters to the rest of us?
Thank you, Mr. Dorsey. I think that's a very appropriate question. And I have been surprised, but pleasantly surprised, about the number of companies that take interest in Arlington, both existing employees and prospective employers that ask about what our equity initiatives look like within the county. Just recently, I'll tout one example. Our initial engagement with Microsoft after their announcement, they were keenly interested in meeting Samia Bird and the work that the county was doing by way of, not naming her the Chief Race and Equity Officer. And I think that's representative of a movement that we see afoot with some of the larger employers really leading the charge by way of placing a larger importance. And so while what I would like to see, obviously, I'd like to see larger representation of and more diversity in some of our larger employers, understanding that they are not nearly, minorities are not nearly as well represented in that sector base. We do often work with many partners with regard to small business serving the minority business community. We partner oftentimes with entities like LEDC and other entities within the region that provide service to people who English is not their first language. And I think that's critical in making them aware from people who they have built a certain level of trust with. Oftentimes there is skepticism from the government, quote unquote, with some of our immigrant population. And it's critical that we continue to build those relationships so that we can get information about the support from not only our, AED, but the larger Arlington business community. So it is a strategic intent to continue to grow that. And we will continue to share. I think what separates Arlington from many other places is our commitment to equity. And so I commend the board for allowing employees the space and the priority to engage in that work, which I believe will become even more critical. And I believe it will provide us a competitive advantage going forward.
Okay, thank you. And just as a slight follow-up to this, I could go on all day, but I'll force discipline on myself. So I know that there's a greater approach towards regional collaboration, not only within the greater metropolitan Washington region, but specifically in Northern Virginia. Do you think that similar focus on equity in business recruitment efforts will find common cause with the other Northern Virginia jurisdictions?
I do. I believe so. I have the fortune of serving as the chair this year for the Northern Virginia Economic Development Alliance. So it gives me a position of privilege to emphasize the importance of that work. And I have heard from many of our peer jurisdictions in Northern Virginia that it is a priority for them. They recognize the disproportionate impact on the minority community through COVID. And I feel more confident going forward that as we lead by example, I think it's easier for some of the larger entities in jurisdictions, Arlington, Fairfax, Alexandria, maybe Loudoun. We tend to take the lead on that, but I think through the power of partnership and many hands making light work, I think we'll see a benefit to the entire region with regard to that working in that space.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dorsey. Around the horn, I next see Ms. Crystal, and then we'll go to Ms. Garvey after that, just so that we plan it out. Go ahead, Ms. Crystal.
Well, thank you so much, Mr. Chair, and thank you. This took a village to talk about the full landscape of economic development in Arlington County, and just appreciate you all so much, and really appreciate Mr. Dorsey surfacing that question, and Mr. Tucker, your distinction between some of these large and maybe multinational employers that are opening offices or headquarters in Arlington, and the way that maybe differentiates from our smallest businesses, right? And we want to support equally. Actually, just earlier today, Mr. Carantonis and I were talking to the leadership of a newly formed Economic Development Committee of the NAACP Arlington branch, which I know is meeting with you and your colleagues too, and talking about this very phenomenon where sometimes having these trusted partners is essential because there is skepticism of government. And as much as we all want to believe we can show up and say we're from the government and here to help, there may be a lot of reasons why some of our small entrepreneurs would feel skepticism. So these trusted partners are invaluable. And since we've got her on the line, just wanted to give it a shout to Ms. Klingler and CPRO in particular. The recently launched CPRO newsletter on Espanol is really exciting for small Latino entrepreneurs on the Pike to support them. And so I think a great example of the way that our partners, whether they be nonprofits or literally our economic development partnerships and bids, can play such critical roles. Okay, so I wanted to talk a little bit about the small business grant program. I think we heard from quite a few folks, and it really did take off with the support of our bids. Thank you, our partnerships. Thank you, and especially your team, Mr. Tucker. I know that there is just so much intentionality about selections, about collecting data, about surrounding those grant recipients with not only money but support. And it was so successful that as we find ourselves now trying to evaluate American Rescue Act money coming in and others, could I ask if the board were to try to give some direction to allocate some of either the COVID contingent or new Rescue Act dollars towards another round of small business grant programs? Do you have thoughts about what you all might replicate or what you might do differently? And if the answer is you need some time to think about that and get answers in writing, that's fine too.
Sure. Well, so I'll take you up on that. Yes, we would like more time to think about that. But I do believe, as we've identified, access to capital is still a major hurdle. I think one of the critical ways that we can identify maybe a shift previously from how we approached it last time was to use specifically our partnerships and our bids to help us reach some of those really difficult to reach businesses. The ones who don't typically show up for the webinars, the one who may or may not have digital access to go online and to learn about the resources. They are by definition hard to reach. And I think the one way we can continue to leverage our partnerships is to figure out a way to reach those folks. And I believe, I don't have, this is purely anecdotal, but I believe that there probably are a significant number of businesses who've not been able to take advantage of federal, state, or other resources out there that are still in pain and need financial support. And I'd very much like to strategically figure out a way to identify who they are and find a way to help them.
That is a great priority. I think I'm seeing some nods from my colleagues too. So as you maybe put some more pen to paper with the team and follow up, I'd be really excited about it. I'm also going to channel Ms. Quinana, since I have the privilege of being the Arts Commission liaison and happen to just be joining the commission a couple weeks ago. Certainly can't represent anything that they would be advising us on, but I can say I know there is interest. We had quite a few actually arts organizations as recipients of the grant program, and I think there may be an opportunity to think about a way to possibly use some of these relief dollars to replicate what we've seen successful with arts grants in the past, which is to say the challenge grants. I know Michelle Isabel Stark on your team and others have done an excellent job of compiling and advising our arts groups on all of these, national or regional philanthropic dollars available to them. And if there is some way we can kind of combine the best of the small business grant program with the sort of past history of the challenge grants that challenge our arts groups to go match funds that the county can grant in this context, I'd be really excited. It may be a bridge too far, a little too complicated to administer at this point, but I see a cool opportunity there potentially. If I can weasel my way into one more question before I yield. One of the things that I think I was sort of hearing some threads throughout, and Ms. Leone in specific cited some of the survey data that they've collected about folks' willingness to start coming back to events. One of the real challenges I think with this pandemic is going to be coming out of it. And we talked just briefly with Mr. Emanuel and DES about the comeback committee in county government, trying to think about how we might reopen facilities. I would just be interested at a high level, what, if any, role you see for AED in helping advise our businesses about how to come back safely? The one thing that's been in even shorter supply than monetary resources during the pandemic has been certainty, right? And for small businesses, it is I know, especially so stressful. So is your team thinking about kind of what advice and role you can play in helping people think about how we might, to borrow Dr. Fauci's repeated metaphor, raise the dimmer, if not flip the light switch, as more vaccinated in our community starts to come back?
Sure. It's an excellent question. We did, I would say, about midway through the pandemic, as the Back to Work Committee within DES, we actually had one of our own members. I think Ife Akabanga was on that group. And one of the things we did was all of the best practices and recommendations for entering the office space that group created for county staff. We actually shared that and pushed that information out to many of our office users because they had questions about, how far do we need to be distancing? Do I need to wear masks when I'm in my closed office versus when I'm in common areas? And so we would like to as we all know, this information has continued to evolve and change, sometimes on a daily. And so I see AED as being a conduit to continue to push that information out to the business community. Oftentimes we hear from our public health officials or our state elected officials or federal elected officials more quickly than the private sector does. And to the extent that we can help to continue to push that information out, I think that'll be a critical role for us to play as well. I did talk about some of the ways in which we've worked with CPHD around regulatory flexibility. I think the existence of the TOSAs and the PTOSAs and some of the other PUDOs and so forth that we the county, with your support, obviously, we moved very quickly on those. I think strategically thinking about how we look at those more long-term, such that we don't rush people back inside too soon. If there's an opportunity for us to raise the dimmer slowly, if you will, if I could use that same acronym that you use, I think that's important. And so the input that we generally provide to our partners within the county is that of the voice of business. And I think it's our duty to make sure that voice remains at the table as we, contemplate what measures we're going to take from a policy standpoint coming out of that. So those are two ways that immediately come to mind, but we're certainly open to hearing other thoughts and ideas and suggestions. Naturally, we've gotten some questions about the availability to set up remote vaccination locations throughout the county. And I know the public health team has actually engaged in some of that work already. Additional testing capacity, which the county responded to with pop-up events and even mobile. We've thought about ways to use some of our mobile visitor vehicles. Emily Cassell was gracious enough to offer that vehicle during the pandemic to either do mobile testing or to do mobile vaccinations if the need arises. So those are some of the ideas that have come to us, either from businesses or that we've developed on our own. But we certainly don't claim to know it all, and we would be more than happy to consider any suggestions that would come from the board or from the public.
Great. Thank you so much. I see our mobile visitor van in the Central Library parking lot nearly weekly when I go to drop off and pick up books. And if the opportunity to see that out doing testing in the community would be so fabulous. Definitely cheering that on.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Crystal. Ms. Garvey.
Yeah, thank you. Ms. Crystal, I love your "It Takes a Village." That's what this presentation has felt like today. And Mr. Tucker, I think maybe, we didn't hold that work session last year when I was chair. And you had just come. Oh my. What a year you picked to come. Wow. And so anyway, thank you for everything. Thank you for telling us about Red Dog and Big Group. So we now know which these groups are. Thank you for looping in and working. I mean, having EDC, as Gabriel described, helping to go through the applications and everything. I mean, the pivoting and the changing that you did this year was just fantastic. And clearly, I think you are absolutely the right person in this job for us right now. And I just really appreciate you being here. And this feels a little bit like two presentations wrapped up in what you did last year's and this year's all at once. So thank you. I think two issues that two opposite groups I kind of find myself thinking about a lot. One is, which we've talked about a bit, but actually the legacy, the mom and pop stores, the legacy stores and businesses that we have here in Arlington. I think those are probably among the ones that are maybe hardest to reach in some ways and maybe need the most support because they've been, I mean, their legacy, because everybody loves them. They've been doing things the same way for a long time and people love it. But they may be really having a hard time adjusting. And I don't know if you want to talk a little bit to that. I do remember, I am trying to remember, I think it was the EDC, I believe, a couple of years ago, they had some students working on a research project to list all of the legacy companies that we had in Arlington, I think. So it seems to me that list exists somewhere. I think maybe Susan Sirocco was involved in that in your staff. And so anyway, that might be a place that might have some folks that you haven't reached out to yet because you didn't quite realize they were there, although you may be all over it and have it all figured out already. But I wondered if you want to talk about that group, and then I've got another group I wanted to talk about after that. And you've touched on it a bit already, obviously.
Sure. Well, thank you. First, thank you for your kind words. My father was a football coach, and I played 3 sports all throughout my life. So I'm very much a team player, and I've tried to do my best to promote a culture of teamwork within AED and with our partners, our bids, our partnerships, our commissions as well. So hopefully that was reflected in the presentation that we did today. To answer your question about legacy businesses, you're exactly correct. Many of them are often most in need because they've been doing business quite successfully the same way for a number of years. And with technological advances being what they are, many of them don't have the ability to, or they have not had the resources to pivot and go online in the absence of having people walk in their doors. And so that was key. That was one of the things that we learned in our surveys early on during the pandemic, which is why, as part of the relaunch program that literally just launched this week, there are identified resources where we have paid for the one-on-one technical support by way of finance, marketing, and business legal services for any of those businesses who can't afford to do that, who may not be able to know, they may not have knowledge on how do I even create an online presence or use social media. Similarly, we have, through the board's approval in the closeout budget from last year, the additional resources we received allowed us to bring on a vendor that will actually build a website and create an e-commerce tool for them as well. And so they really don't need to have the knowledge or have the finances to be able to do that. That's a service that they can now apply for through AED. We will set them up directly with a vendor who will build it, train them on how to use it, and hopefully the strategic intent is for them to broaden their customer base beyond just those who can walk in their door and those who might live in Arlington. Really, in order to remain competitive as a legacy business, I think many of our businesses are going to have to expand their customer base. And so those are 2 things additionally that we are doing. I will make a note to go back and check with Susan Sirocco and staff about that list that was created that you referenced. I'm not familiar with it, but I'm sure it's there. And then I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, not necessarily. I could have it wrong, and it might be only legacy companies that are 100 years old. So I may not be remembering properly. So that's fine. Thank you.
One other thought that I wanted to share. Recently, we received a request, I think, for recognition. I think Chair DeFerranti received a request for recognition by legacy businesses, and we have internally been planning on putting a letter together and every year sending a letter. Basically, we would check with the Commissioner of Revenue on how long businesses have been open in Arlington and send them a congratulatory letter signed by the chair that recognizes their years of service to the Arlington community, particularly on those milestone years, whether it's 20, 30, 40, 50 years. I think that would be a nice gesture as a way to say thank you for doing business here, and hopefully, using traditional mail services might be a way for us to engage them in a way that we haven't before. And so I know that's a small thing, but we're trying to think of more traditional ways to engage some of those legacy businesses.
No, that feels like a big thing to me, actually. I think it's brilliant. Thank you. I think it's a great idea. I remember having some businesses saying, I don't think you all even realize I've been here. So that's great. And then if I might, I'm going to indulge myself a little bit with my own thoughts about what's going on and see what you think, if that's all right. When we started this, I've talked to a few young people who are not all that young, but very mobile, very technological. They're like the opposite extreme of the legacy businesses. They can go anywhere. They can be, in the Caribbean, they could be in, Asia, and they can do their work here. And with the pandemic, school's out, they're gone. And finding, well, why should I live in Arlington? And in fact, I think there were some articles about how people were leaving California, and the new places were Florida and Texas that were trying to attract folks. Of course, that was before the snowstorm in Texas, and some problems with Texas might have become more evident. And I think also with the pandemic and how Florida's handled some things, there's some problems that have become evident. And now I've read some articles about people coming back. I think it was actually to New York, but it was because of the schools. They weren't finding comfortable with schools. So I'm thinking that maybe with the pandemic, this seemed like a great idea to be somewhere else, but that the advantages of Arlington maybe are becoming a little clearer and hopefully coming back. Do you see that happening? And obviously it's crucial with schools because, for a while, why would you come back for schools if they're not open? They're open now, but that seems to me a major thing. So I'm just inviting you to opine a little bit about what you think about that other that other group of people.
No, I think my thinking is very much aligned with yours. Many of the location decisions on where families choose to live are based on the schools, particularly if they are planning or they have school-age children. So that is a feather in our cap in Arlington, and I think it's one that we need to continue to promote. But if I could highlight a couple of other things that I think also are going to be critical for us, and yes, I do think there will be interest in people coming back to markets similar to Arlington. We will need to double down, if you will, on our placemaking strategies. That's why our relationships, the work that the bids do, each one of the bids do tremendous work, marketing and thinking about things like public art, live music, entertainment. We're really are an experience-driven culture, the younger generation today. And even if you look at what's happening with restaurants and nightlife and even in retail, many of them are infusing entertainment or some experiential facet within their business model because people want to remember going out and having a good time or going shopping and getting to, do something that is out of the ordinary. So I think to the extent that we put our creative caps on and continue to promote that, it's what separates us, I think, from some other places. And I know for me coming to Arlington, the desire to be able to be in a community that's walkable, that has public transit, that has great schools, that still have restaurants and shopping, and all those things will continue. We're social creatures by nature. We have been since the beginning of time. I don't think that will change. But I think it will be incumbent upon us to push the envelope a little bit more to make sure that people understand that this is not a sleepy place. This is a place where people come and experience life and have a good time, and that they want to continue to live and they want to visit. And we've been having conversations internally, particularly our cultural affairs and our convention and visitor services team, about making sure we are cross-promoting the assets that are in Arlington, such that when visitors come and they go, wow, I really had no idea that all this was here in Arlington, it gives me a reason to come back. And that reason to come back may eventually translate in a decision to open a business here or locate here. So my thinking is very much in line with yours, former Chair Garvey. And I think we will do our best to continue to focus on place-based marketing strategy as a way to make sure people are attracted to coming back.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate you elaborating on that. It kind of shows how it all pulls together, right? It's not just economic development, it's schools, it's parks, it's the bike trail, it's everything we do to make this an attractive community, all fits together. So I just appreciate you opining a little bit. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's it, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you, Ms. Garvey and Mr. Tucker. That really did pull out placemaking is an additional point that is really important to just emphasize. Mr. Karantonis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I will be mindful of the time and be brief. Mr. Tucker, thank you so much. I cannot tell you how much I appreciate the work that the business investment group has done, that the work that the real estate group has done, that BizLaunch has done. And I really appreciate your leadership in keeping our cultural affairs still in a key player position to do exactly that, to support economic development, but also support the cultural character of this community. So this is a double achievement there. And I thank you personally for really bringing a lot of responsiveness to the real problems that this pandemic has, opened. You had a long conversation here with my colleagues already about equity and about, how our equity lens refracts the light and that comes from a challenged economy this year, and actually how it illuminates the path forward. And if there is one phrase that you repeated actually in various versions, is placemaking, you said, will be key on why we retain people in Arlington. And I believe that you didn't only mean residents, but actually economic assets. So I heard talking about the work that our business improvement districts do under difficult, less or more difficult circumstances. But here we have also the work that our partnerships do. This, Ms. Crystal mentioned this year, this is the Bulletin en Español that CIPRO issued. And the reason why it's in print, it's because this is the way to get to the hard to get, because they are not opening their newsletters. Not easy. I mean, it's not habitual. Now, we would definitely want, wouldn't we, that our equivalent partnerships on Lee Highway and Clarendon would be able to do exactly the same, adapted to their customers, to their places. So what can we do? What pathways ahead for us? What options do we have to actually fund them better and, strategically orient them to deliver on placemaking for the entire county and not only for the sectors?
It's a very good question. What I would say is I'd like to maybe revisit with the staff and county leadership on the financial resources and how we approach that strategically to think about identifying other ways to create financial resources to support that work. I know that the relationships we have specifically with our partnerships are critical. They're going to continue to be critical to our recovery. Maybe what I will do is start by either asking Susan Sirocco or Tara Palacios, who I believe both are here, maybe to just highlight one or two examples of how we've worked with our partnerships in the past or recently, and in hopes that generates some other ideas of how we can do more of that going forward. I think, I've met Ms. Padmore recently, and her enthusiasm and her energy is contagious. I have no doubt that she is going to be passionate about serving the Clarendon community. And similarly, our colleagues in the LHA area, I commend them for the work that they're taking on, particularly with the renaming of Lee Highway and the plans there. They have been wonderful partners to work with, and they do have regular communication with our staff. So let me pause and allow Susan and or Tara just to share a little bit about that, and feel free to add to your question.
Yeah, thank you, Telly, and thank you, board, for asking these great questions. What I've seen with the partnership organizations is an enormous amount of readiness along the way. Whatever we've been asking them to help us with, they have been active and deployed their resources immediately to help. One example is when we were looking at reaching out to grocery chains, small ones and large ones, to be able to deploy vaccines to food service employees. They responded immediately with lists of contacts and people that we should get in touch with. We saw them work immediately with doing some business roundtable work. All three partnerships were involved in reaching out to small businesses to make sure that they knew specialty areas that they could deploy really quickly to benefit their businesses. Most recently, CPRO had a roundtable with a food stylist, and we all know that your presence on social media is really more important than ever. So getting tips for how to provide the best visuals for the products that you have was really critical. It was really important and very essential. And we saw examples like from the Clarendon Alliance, who partnered with us like on a very short notice to reach out to their businesses for information that helped DTS with the Safety and Innovation Zone project. And we couldn't have done that without a good, strong relationship. They knew exactly who to talk to. Clarendon Alliance has been at the ready constantly with being able to go out and know who their constituents are. And the same for Lee Highway and CPRO. Really, they have demonstrated their willingness to be able to reach out to their constituents in any way that we've asked of them.
Thank you, Ms. Sirocco. Ms. Palacios.
Yes, I would definitely concur. Good evening, everyone. It's so good to see you all. Hopefully in person sometime soon, right? But I just wanted to say that it's so helpful for us to have close relationships with the bids and the partnerships. I can say that in the work that we did in lifting up the grant and in the work that we have in outreaching to some of the legacy businesses and hard to reach businesses, having that collaboration and cooperation is priceless. I think as we come up from the pandemic and businesses are going to need as much support as possible, it's going to be even more important for us to be able to do this type of outreach. We have plans, and we've been meeting and talking to the bids and the partnerships about some of the new programming that we have coming up, especially with relaunch, as Telly spoke about. One thing that's really important to me is to make sure that we outreach to those legacy businesses. We have a really good way of being able to get to the usual suspects, people that can adapt and can pivot, know how to access resources. But I am committed to making sure that we reach out to those people that it's harder for them to be able to get this type of information. And one of the key ways I believe that we can do this is by working with our partners. Some of the creative out-of-the-box thinking that we're starting to do with our partnerships, with CPRO, with their Buy a Nurse program, it was so important for us to participate in that with them, because not only is it helping our frontline folks, it's also helping our small businesses. They're really reliant. It's amazing the amount of cash or income that they need to help them kind of get through the next 6 months. And so being able to do that and to maximize and to promote the businesses as much as possible is the type of out-of-the-box thinking that we've been doing as we move forward. Because really what we've also found is it can't just be the county. It has to be all of us collectively working together as a community so that we have impact. And so I'm really committed to go forward, to thinking differently, and to continue doing that. So thank you all, and it's good to see you.
I did have one additional thought I wanted to share related to Mr. Karantonis' question. I have heard from our partnership specifically that they have suffered financially due to the inability to have events, which are typically fundraisers for them. So, you know, I've heard wonderful reviews of the team, the special events team that helps, you know, make sure that they follow the proper protocol when doing special events. Perhaps one way we can consider, which I know Roslyn, for example, cited in their comments, perhaps there's a way for us to help them strategically with doing more of that type of thing in Arlington. I mean, who doesn't love a good festival? particularly ones that I'm biased, but I like the cultural ones where I get to sample foods from all different countries. But perhaps that's something that we can think about, how we partner with the partnerships more to help them raise funds that will enable them to provide more service and some of the place-making work that they do. That's just an initial thought, but I will take that away as an action item with the team and to talk to county leadership about strategically how we support additional resources for them.
Thank you, Mr. Tucker, and Mr. Rocco, and the entire BizLaunch team has been an amazing partner for everybody over this time. I have an additional question, and the grant program has been, to me, it was always interpreted as a response program to a acute situation, or to an emergency and a lifeline for these businesses. Now, in your conversation with Ms. Crystal, you already mentioned that you are thinking about the next iteration of that. A relaunch is actually a first connecting piece to that. But I really think that one of the lessons we draw from the pandemic is that, and as you correctly pointed out, access to capital is still and remains a key problem, right? For the small, the minority-owned, the women-owned, the Black and Brown-owned businesses. I'm not going to say that we should convert or we should run a program that will permanently provide funding, but a program that creates the partnerships with lenders, with microloan lenders, to provide a pathway of reliable access to this kind of support, which doesn't have to be a grant. It can be also a loan system. I would just encourage you to think about that, and that probably needs also some internal staff support, and that may have a budget footprint. That's just an opinion. And the last question is, I saw that some of your in the reduction, some of your social media budget is going to suffer, and the promotion budget for Arlington County. Now, Amazon, Nestle, Microsoft, etc., has put us on a map as a very vibrant central place, a good place to invest for the big fish as well for the small. We have clients, I guess, entire sectors of the economy that we would be looking at, like, for example, academic institutions and others that we would like to have here in Arlington. What is the impact of this reduction to our ability to sell Arlington and national, and probably even international, on an international stage?
It's a very good question, and a complex one in the sense that trying to predict behavior of those that we're trying to reach, it's certainly not an exact science. But what I would say is what we will have to do is we'll have to prioritize the spending that we do have available into the most impactful, avenues. And there are, I think one of the myths out there is that social media is free to use, but they're strategically, if you want to get more visibility, there are paid services through social media that we often employ as part of our strategy. We may not be able to do as many of those, but I think we'll just have to be more strategic. How will it impact us long term? I might say that it may take a bit longer to reach the audiences that we had previously wanted to reach more quickly, or we may not be able to reach them as often. We often use the analogy of a faucet drip on people, such that, if they hear Arlington, Virginia a number of times, it begins to resonate with them. And, when they come to a business location decision or a family vacation decision, we want them to think, oh, I learned something new about Arlington because I've heard it. a number of times. And so while we may not be able to be as intentional about how many times we touch our intended audiences, I think that could be one potential impact. You know, we're confident that if we are fortunate enough to be repatriated some of those funds through the American Recovery Act, I think we would repurpose those toward marketing in those three areas that I mentioned: marketing and our tourism hospitality support and our small business as well. I think those are three areas that stand to need the most support right now.
Thank you. I'm
sure.
I yield, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Carantonis. You actually covered one of the just couple of last points I have, so I really am down to two. And Ms. Palacios and Ms. Sirocco's passion for the work came shining through, and your care for your team, Telly, also is evident. I took notes. I think there's a couple of people who may be listening who we didn't mention, and I only mentioned Cindy Richmond, Katie McConnell, and Kelly Reinfuzz because they're indicative. You are part of the key work we have to do to recover. And that goes for our partnerships and the staff of the Lee Highway Alliance and all of us and Ms. Leone and Ballston Bid. So just a big thank you to everyone we haven't seen here who is central to the next phase of this year, in my opinion, which is we're stabilizing our community as far as our health. And it's getting warmer, and we just passed the American Rescue Plan, and recovery is a lot of the subject of today's discussion. So with that hope, I'm optimistic. We have to last through the next months as we continue to get vaccine out. But as we do that, we will recover equitably, and we'll do it with more hope. And there'll be a time when we can go to restaurants and smile at each other and actually see each other in person. So with that note, we will adjourn today's work session. Thank you, colleagues, manager, and all of the staff still listening. Thanks so much.
Thank you, everybody. Everybody stay well. It's great.
Take care.
Thank you so much.